gentlemen, and welcome to the Planning, Building, and Environmental Committee meeting for Monday, May 14th. My name is Joanne Chichok, and I will be your chair for tonight. Before we moved into any of the items, may I remind everyone here that all cell phone pages and PDAs are to be turned off, and additionally, for your information, we are also audio and video recording this meeting. Looking to members of the committee to ask if there's anyone wishing to change an order of items on the agenda. Seeing none, I'm looking for disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councilor Bell.
Madam Chair, I have a conflict of interest. My conflict of interest is under staff reports. It's item P71-18, Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Report number PD-070-18. The subject recommendation report. It's for Wade Road, removal of holding residential RB1, or R1B, sorry, zoning, and the Ontario Municipal Board Appeal. Part Lot 8, Plan M97, Ontario Municipal Board File PL 170875. Related township file is B1020 17 WL. And for the record, Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I will not be taking part in the discussions and or will I be voting on this matter.
Thank you, Councilor Bell, and I'll look to you for that indication. And you're right, I forgot pecuniary interest and or conflict. I believe that's a conflict of interest that you have. Okay, any others? Seeing no others, then the first public meeting is a meeting with regard to the 911 public emergency reporting address remediation for Dufferin Street or Ave. Okay, so the purpose of this meeting is to give opportunity for the public and committee to provide comments and ask questions regarding the correction of the street suffix for Dufferin Street, Dufferin Ave. Mr. Treble, would you please provide us with an explanation of the history of this matter and the issues relating to the different suffixes, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to have Rachel, my apologies. I'm going to have Rachel give an overview, if I may, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Township staff have been working with the region on the 911 Public Emergency Reporting Service project to identify and correct street naming inconsistencies within the township since 2013. In January, staff presented a report to Planning Committee regarding the Dufferin suffix correction. This was a result of the township receiving a request from a regional GIS analyst to confirm the correct suffix on Dufferin Avenue or street due to an inquiry by a resident. In the report, staff recommended that a public consultation occur with the residents of Dufferin prior to a bylaw being presented to council for consideration. No public comments have been received to date. Staff recommend a report being presented at a future planning committee meeting once all public input has been received to determine the suffix. All changes ultimately recommended are essential in order to ensure the safety of township's residents. Any updates and changes to mitigate the 911 servicing issues are beneficial to residents in the event of an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to hear from you. Is there anyone from the public here present that would like to ask a question or provide input regarding the choices? If you do, if you would come forward, please identify yourself and give us your address. And if you've got a copy of what you're presenting, you can give that to us.
I don't. Kathy Jones, Dufferin Street Ave. After talking to most of the neighbors on the street, at my end of the street, we would like street. The sign on 20 Highway that for some reason isn't there anymore was street. All of our ID, because we all got our driver's licenses out, say street. Where it became an issue with us is, I guess, the internet. We always called it Dufferin Street. And then with the internet, when you want to Google something or for a delivery, we're getting calls saying there's no such thing as Dufferin Street. Used 3-4 months ago, delivered a map in the mail to let us know the new streets in Smithville, and Used had street. So I just want, I mean, we would prefer street, but we got to pick one because I never even thought of the 911 issues till Used brought that up. But we've had problems with deliveries on the street regarding it. So I know that the neighbors at my end of the street that I talked to would prefer street.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here present wishing to address the meeting?
Just, Madam Chair, just for the record, from staff's perspective, it really doesn't matter whether it's a street or an avenue. It's just we have bylaws that say both things. So if there's a consensus here tonight, then we can take our direction from that and proceed forward with the recommendation report. So I just wanted that on the table. If the majority of the people are of the opinion that street is the way it should be, then I am more than satisfied to proceed that way. It looks like historically it was intended to be an avenue, but that's just history. I did see the sign blade this morning, so I'm not sure where it went in the meantime, but
Okay. Thank you very much. And just for the record, what I did hear earlier from staff was that there has been opportunity for input, but we've received nothing really other than this evening. So that would suggest that anything received tonight could be used in the decision making. Members of committee, is there anyone here wishing to say anything? Councilor Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when this came up, I went about to do my own little fact-finding mission, and so the first people I went to was my mom and dad, because they lived on that street back in 1966.
That street?
Yeah. So I asked Mom, and Councillor Gannon, you might know this before they moved to South Street. They lived on Dufferin. And so I said, Mom, what was the name? And she said, you know, I honestly can't remember, but the first thing that came out of her mouth, was Dufferin Avenue. I said, are you sure? She said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Dufferin Avenue. So, you know what? I concur with what the Director Trumbull is saying. We just really are at the will of the community, the residents who live on Dufferin. And if they want it to become Dufferin Street, then I think we should just switch it to Dufferin Street. To me, this is a question of safety. And if fire and emergency and EMS and police cannot find the proper address, we have a problem. So from a GPS point of view, and as Mrs. Jones says, from an internet point of view, we should all get on the same page. And I think if it's tonight, if we can all agree on it being Dufferin Street, let's just go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wondered if I could, although we said there was only one person speaking tonight, and that was Kathy. Kathy, if I may, through you, Madam Chair, did you feel that the residents were hopeful that you would be speaking on their behalf?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna get them to sign something, and then we just kind of thought it was overkill. It was just kind of
Yeah.
out in the street talking. I mean, I don't really, my next door neighbors, which most people here know, got out their driver's licenses. They
Right,
just-
but the general feeling was it was more than just your
We've never
request.
We've never referred to it as avenue until the Google thing came
Yeah,
up.
okay. Well, we've been here 47 years, and I've only noted it as street as well, so that's okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Other members of committee? Well, reaching consensus is a great thing with the public and committee. Secondly, it takes one of those items off our list because I live on one of the silver streets in this town. So I'd be happy to resolve some of the other issues. And people with money live on the other one. We're out in the rural area, so, that would be the silver. Okay. Anyway. Okay, having heard that, then I will go on, because this is a public meeting, I'll take care of the quasi-judicial things that we should do and state that any persons that wish to be notified when the recommendation report will be presented to the Planning, Building, and Environmental Committee for consideration, and subsequently at the following council meeting for ratification are asked to clearly print their name, address, email, and telephone number on the attendance record located near the exit doors. Please place a check mark in the column marked Dufferin suffix. That's a different one. The purpose of collecting the name, address, phone number, and email address is so staff will be able to contact any interested individuals when this issue will be addressed at future planning, building, environmental meeting, and council. Tonight is just a technical report. The actual report will be coming forward. This is a technical report that is being considered with respect to this matter this evening, and the public are invited to stay in attendance to hear the planning committee's comments with respect to this matter, should there be any, which will take place following the conclusion of the public meetings being held this evening. I'd like to note that a technical report is only being considered by the planning committee this evening, and the recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and council. Again, please be advised that Additionally, any person who is interested in observing council and or committee discussions regarding this application should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for postings of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and a committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also posted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-in sheet. Thank you. This public meeting concludes at the hour of 6:44 with regard to the Dufferin Street setbacks. The next public meeting we are to hear this evening is public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application for Bar Creek Farms Limited. Planning Act requires in section 34 sub 12 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. At this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by committee and council in their consideration. Planning Act also requires, through section 34 sub 13, the council advise the public that a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a oral or written submissions at a public meeting. Pardon me, to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, a person and or public is not entitled to appeal the decision of the council for the Township of West Lincoln to the LEAT, the Local Planning Approval Tribunal, which has recently replaced the Ontario Municipal Court. Madam Clerk, could you please advise the method and dates by which notice has been given to the public?
Proper notice was given by way of individual notice dated April 10th, 2018.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper, I believe you are going to tell us about this particular application.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can we get the drawing up on the screen? You want to scroll down to the next one? Scroll down to the second page. Thanks. So a rezoning application was made by Bar Creek Farms for 6832 16 Road. This rezoning application is required as a condition of consent from application B13 2017 WL, passed on February 21st, 2018 by the Committee of Adjustment. The severed residential lot is proposed to be rezoned to rural residential with a site-specific exemption number to recognize an existing accessory building with a ground floor area of 135 square meters. The retained agricultural lot is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to agricultural purposes only with a site-specific exemption number to recognize a deficient lot area of 5.5 hectares. No public comments have been received to date on the application. The township's official plan designates the property as good general agricultural. Bona fide farmers are eligible for surplus farm dwelling severances under the official plan's policy, provided that the lot is no larger or smaller than 0.4 hectares or 1 acre in size. The applicants are bona fide farmers, and the proposed residential lot to be severed is approximately 0.4 hectares in size or an acre. Therefore, the applicants qualify for a surplus farm dwelling severance. The subject property is zoned A for agricultural under the township zoning bylaw. The severed 0.4 hectare residential lot is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to rural residential with a site-specific exemption number, and the retained farmland is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to agricultural purposes only with a site-specific exemption number. Staff recommend that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant or their agent here this evening wishing to address the meeting? Seeing none, I'll ask anyone from the public wishing to address the committee with regard to this application. This is Bartech Farms Limited. Okay, I'll confine it to table, and seeing no more anyone wishing to speak to this item? Pardon me. I will remind members of the committee that any comments or questions with regarding clarification regarding the zoning bylaw should be made at this time. Still seeing none, please be advised, this is a technical report that is being considered by planning committee this evening, and that the recommendation report will be forthcoming to future planning committee and council. Please be advised that once the planning committee and or council have made their decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment and approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated within a appeal period. Pardon me. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's meeting, that you place a check mark in the column marked Bartek Farms if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. I would also like to ensure that all people who are interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at council or committee meetings. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Wednesday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-in sheet. So this meeting with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment concluded at the hour of 6:50. Our next public meeting is a public meeting to consider a full zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by the Township of West London with respect to housekeeping amendments to the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw. Planning Act requires in section 34 sub 12, before passing the zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of that amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public and members of the committee regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln's zoning bylaw. At this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by the committee and council in their consideration. The Planning Act also requires that through section 34 sub 13, the committee and council advise the public that a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed. A person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the council for the Township of West Lincoln to the local planning approval tribunal. Madam Clerk, please advise that the record dates for which the public can give notice.
Proper notice was given by way of advertising in a newspaper with general circulation on April 5th, 2018.
Thank you so much. Mr. Foreman, I hear you have carriage of this item and will go through this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In June of last year, the township approved its new comprehensive zoning bylaw, which replaced zoning bylaw 1979-14, approved almost 40 years ago. This new zoning bylaw has performed fairly well. However, staff have found that there are a number of corrections that need to happen. These include corrections to provisions dealing with accessory buildings, accessory dwelling units, home industries. Some of the definitions need updating, parking provisions, and there are several site-specific changes, all of which are outlined in the table in the report. One of the site-specific changes involves 9371 Silver Street, which was previously zoned to permit a 3-unit apartment building. And when the new township zoning bylaw came in, it reverted it back to commercial C3 zoning, which was incorrect. So staff are proposing that specific zoning be restored to its original residential zoning to permit 3 units. And I believe the property owner is here this evening and may wish to speak to this. The owner wishes to have 5 units, and staff have informed him that this procedure for housekeeping is just meant to correct the changes that may have correct the errors that may have come about from the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, and that if the applicant or the landowner wishes to go to 5 units, a separate rezoning application would be required. An open house was also held in April, at which no public comments were received. And since the initial report has gone to Planning Committee in March, there have been some minor changes to the proposed zoning amendments, and these include redefining what a front yard is, limiting the placement of accessory buildings to ensure that accessory buildings are located in clusters on a property, and clarifying some of the allowable projections into the required yard for things like decks and stuff. The region and the MPCA have reviewed the proposed changes and have no objections. And planning staff recommend that once all committee, agency, and the public's comments are heard this evening, that they be received and reviewed and incorporated into a recommendation report to be prepared for a future planning, building, and environmental committee meeting.
Is there anyone here from the public wishing to address in written or verbal form this committee regarding this zoning bylaw amendment? Ask one more time, is there anyone here wishing to address the zoning bylaw amendment or the comprehensive zoning bylaw
Proper notice was given by way of advertising in a newspaper with general circulation on April 5th, 2018.
Mr. Tredwell, I understand that you'll be providing us with the background and commentary on this application.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is a request initiated through the Planning Committee and Council to take a look at a draft of the zoning bylaw that was put together back in 2013, 2014. At that particular point in time, staff and council were aware of the fact that Health Canada was proposing to change the rules and allow for production of medical marijuana to start occurring. And it was felt that the township should be proactive and put in place some regulations to control where and how such uses would be allowed in the township. At the same time as a staff report was considered and approved in March of 2014, it was the instruction of committee at that point that we should review the provisions after a certain length of time, given that we had put them together with the best understanding we had, but it often becomes more evident how they work once you have an application before you. So until about a year ago, we really had no applications before us. The first application on Port Davidson Road was a test of our zoning regulations, and generally the regulations worked well in the sense that it required applicants to make an application to obtain approval. The two zones where it was contemplated that such a use as a medical marijuana production facility would be allowed were on the agricultural zones or in the industrial zones, and those zoning regulations were in place and still are today. But staff commenced a review at the request of committee and have before you an attachment to the staff report, a draft revised set of regulations that we're recommending be considered by committee. And the essence of the regulations are to allow for licensed facilities that meet the Health Canada standards for licensed production facilities, and they're using the word cannabis now, not marijuana. So production facilities for licensed cannabis production, staff are proposing that those be considered. But if it is a designated facility or a facility that is accommodating multiple individual operations on the same property, that those would not be allowed in the township. So the proposal effectively is that the higher standard facilities could come forward, make an application for rezoning for a site that they find appropriate for their proposal, and then committee and council would go through the public meeting process to determine whether or not the application as presented is appropriate in that given location. The provisions are there for the applicants to attempt to comply with, and then through the public meeting process, council has the right to determine whether or not those provisions should be applied to the property and whether there are any exceptions that might be considered appropriate at that time. The other provision that's in the draft at attachment to the report talks about the fact that if a special zoning process is not undertaken for the individual property, then a cannabis facility is prohibited on that property. So we've sort of written the bylaw to say it's prohibited anywhere in the township unless the zoning process is approved for a particular site. The only other thing, Madam Chair, I'll speak to right now is the fact that there are, as of today, we have now received our 4th complete application. So because those applications are in before these new provisions, then they would be evaluated against the existing regulations that are in place. But the essence of setbacks and the intent for compliance really has not changed. It's just the permitted uses are a little bit broader to allow for the designated and individual licenses under the existing rules. So, Madam Chair, in a nutshell, I'm hoping that sort of captures the flavor of the proposed changes that staff are presenting, and I'll turn it back to you and be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tredwell. Are there any individuals here present wishing to address this particular item? That would be the item regarding the zoning change to the comprehensive zoning bylaw
I do. I just have a couple of things to say. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to commend the staff and the council of the day for realizing in 2014 that there might be things happening by 2018 that were certainly unforeseen. And additionally, I'd like to thank the staff who have worked on this to really look at the situations that we faced in the last little while and have tried to come to terms with that and tighten up the things that we're looking at. The other thing that I would like put on the record is the fact that one thing came in, one letter in regard to the public meeting indicating that the person who sent it did not like the idea of the setbacks that are there, the 150-meter setback, and referred to it as something that seemed unfair. And I think that I would like to just have publicly stated that I think it's more than fair to our residents to have a good-sized setback put in place for neighbors who certainly would have some concerns about who's moving in to the buildings and the open land that's next to their property that they've been enjoying. So, thank you.
I just want to ask one question, and it's kind of a reoccurring question when these things come up, and so I just want to get on the record for this particular public meeting, and that is with respect to the health issues of the smell of cannabis production. I know that the zoning bylaw amendment has that a filtration system must be included in any application or any site that's taking place, and sometimes they fail, and the skunk smell ends up in the neighborhood. And I just want to know if we can continue to pursue information with respect to the health concerns with regards to the actual smell, and just get that on at this time. So if there's some kind of reporting or some kind of information that we can get on the health effects of the smell, that'd be great.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, I've contacted Health Canada, and I've also contacted the local OMAFRA representatives who are now considering this an agricultural crop and providing guidance and advice. So far, I have not been able to get a direct answer with respect to the question, but I would be happy to pursue it with the medical officer of health to see if there's any opinion that might be at that level, and attempt to report that back through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Treble, I would like an answer from E. And E states that notwithstanding Clause D of the subsection, a security fence having a minimum height of 1.8 meters shall be provided and maintained around the entire perimeter of the building. Is it my understanding, Mr. Treble, that before it said the entire perimeter of the property? And if that is in case true, then I much prefer this one, the perimeter of the building, because if you have 50 acres and they're building a medical marijuana facility on 20, I don't want a fence going around all 50 acres because it seems like a waste of money. So I much prefer it to be around just the building. And I'm on page 98, Mr. Treble. Question E, just simply because it's easier to secure and it's better security in my opinion.
Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair, the intent of the revised wording is to be exactly as the mayor has indicated around the perimeter of the buildings that are used for that purpose, as opposed to trying to fence securely an 80-acre farm parcel or something to that effect. So that's the intent. The other wording of the previous bylaw wasn't as clear in that regard, so we've attempted to improve that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Treble. You mentioned that there would be requirements of a rezoning for any application, and if that fails, then the process fails. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. A medical marijuana facility would only be permitted in the township of West Lincoln if council has granted approval of a zoning amendment for that property.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Further that, Madam Chair, through to Mr. Treble, with regards to comments from Councillor Billsma, with regards to smell, if they do get the approval of the rezoning and they do construct and there is a smell, is there something the township can do to cease the operations?
Through you, Madam Chair, the message that staff have been given to date is that odor-related issues generated by such facilities are not considered to be Ministry of the Environment issues. They are considered to be Health Canada issues. So there are individuals, I am told, who are available to do that kind of enforcement, but I'm not familiar with those individuals and have not worked with them. So we're still investigating exactly how that happens. I understand the Ministry of the Environment will receive the complaint and forward it on to the appropriate people, but I don't know how it unfolds from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Mr. Treble, my past experience with relying on the government, federal, to help you doesn't usually work too quickly. Is there anything that the township can do to put that into some of their bylaws with regards to the smell, that they would have the ability, instead of relying on a third party, which is not the most efficient in the world, to deal with this effectively?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd have to probably do some further investigating to see how local bylaws could work in tandem, I guess, with Health Canada regulations. Certainly, if it was a provincial regulation, the provincial regulation would take precedence, but I'd need to investigate that with respect to working with the feds. So I'll take that under advisement and report back.
Thank you. Specifically, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Treble, I was thinking of some course or something that could be offered by the federal government that would give our bylaw officer the authority and responsibility to act on behalf of the residents, so we don't have to go through the federal way, which could take forever and a day.
Okay, I'll investigate. Through you, Madam Chair.
Okay, one further question, Madam Chair, through to Mr. Treble, with regards to the existing operations that I believe are still going on in the township of West Lincoln. What is the process on that? If they are infractions of zoning bylaws that exist now, not even discussing the new ones that are being proposed, what direction is being done on behalf of the residents to curtail that illegal operations?
Anything that is currently under investigation is under bylaw infractions, and we have to run cameras for that.
I'm not asking for specific names. I'm just wondering if there is a process. Are they actively involved in dealing with the situations so that they can become under the proper laws and regulations and bylaws that we have existing right now?
Okay, so generally, anyone who wishes to start up something that is not within our bylaw, how would you treat that, Councilor?
No, has started.
What I
Has started or
What I can tell you, Madam Chair, through you, is that there are no approved zoning amendments in our township right now, so there are no facilities that are allowed to operate with local approval. Those that are operating are under investigation and through bylaw enforcement and legal counsel at this moment, and there's actually one item on confidential session for further discussion tonight in that regard.
I think that answered my question very well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have two questions. One is D, and it says, all licensed production facilities of cannabis for medical purposes or permitted in the employment zones shall have a minimum setback of 45 meters from all lot lines abutting lots that are used or permitted to be used for a dwelling or for an institutional. I got a problem with 45 meters in institutional. Institutional means a school also. And as been stated by councils at the table, odor, smell, 45 meters isn't very far from a school if it butts onto that industrial property. And
I would be on page 98.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is wording that's taken right out of the 2014 bylaws. So staff can certainly look at that and identify that as part of the recommendation report.
I'd like to see it changed and be increased for that purpose alone. And the next question would be C. You state no outside storage or outdoor growing or production of medical marijuana shall be permitted. Does that include, when you speak of outdoors, are you talking about barns, sheds, other structures outside the main building? I'm referring to what we went through at Port Davison Road.
Through you, Madam Chair, the site-specific zoning will obviously identify what buildings are in fact permitted for the growing of it. Once those zonings, or once the zoning identifies the permitted buildings, then anything else would be subject to that provision that says that you're not to be growing beyond those buildings. So we have to make sure when we consider a zoning application on a property that we're clear in terms of what buildings are being granted approval for construct, or for growing and production, and the others would then not be permitted to have that occurring within them.
So, I just heard what you said, you want to be specific, but you also talk about storage. And that's tough, because if they got a building there, what can they store in that building?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would be my thought that this kind of discussion needs to happen on a case-by-case basis to know, if it's a tractor or something that's required to clear the lane of snow in the winter or something, that might not be as big an issue as if it is, a production facility equipment or whatever that might be part of the actual growing operations. So
That's where I'm kind of going,
Okay.
because we're,
Excess plant material, et cetera.
I would, through you, Madam Chair, I would think that we would also want to make that clear as part of the zoning bylaw, how that is to be handled on a case-by-case basis. So it's nothing that's going to generate odors or smells should be really permitted as part of the complete facility at the end of the process.
so can we look at having that written into it so that it's specifically there,
Sure.
so that we're
I
not
can-
grasping down the road?
I can take a look at that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Councilor Ganyan?
Please.
You? Sorry.
Thank you. Just to allay some of those fears, I did a bit of research this afternoon as well, and some of the concerns that this council have are relating specifically to the kind of facility that we were approached about in the past, and for sure, we need to have some things in place for that. So I appreciate that Mr. Treble is willing to look at that. However, this afternoon, I spent a few hours looking at the differences in looking at licensed facilities, and those regulations are very different and very clear, and in fact, it even talks about storage. There's a whole, I took about 5 or 6 documents, but there's an archive guidance document, application to become a licensed producer under the marijuana for medical purposes regulations. And it lays out very clearly, and that might be the kind of thing that we want to mirror in our bylaw, but storage, for example, and this is for people who are wishing to have those kinds of licenses. And all of the stuff with Health Canada needs to be in place before they even can apply for a license. So I think that West Lincoln will have some protection there as long as we can close the gap on the things that have not been so good. Storage was an issue here, and the security requirements, physical security around the site is mentioned very specifically in the document. In terms of security requirements for the storage of all controlled substances, including dried marijuana, marijuana seeds, and cannabis for the purpose of conducting testing only by licensed producers, the applicant is encouraged to follow the directives on physical security requirements. And then it's pages and pages and pages of things that they must have in place, and what they have to outline, and what kind of walls they need to have, and what kind of security around, what kind of visual security on their property that they need to have around the perimeter. So there's a bit more protection for us under these guidelines than there was under the others. So hopefully, by the time we put together what our staff is working on with the new regulations, we'll be in better shape.
So, Councilor Ganyan, perhaps we directed those findings of yours to staff. They can be incorporated into what it is the research is doing, and a copy of it to all members of the committee. Would that be fair?
Fair enough?
I just think that.
Well, I think if staff are working from what the guidelines are, and they're the most recent ones, and then look for the holes and the loopholes that somebody might try to use against the municipality, then there are ways of protecting ourselves as we write that bylaw. But certainly, certainly, the more I learned about these rules and regulations, the more I could see why the decision was made to try to go under individual growing licenses and registrations, because certainly it's a night and day difference in the requirements, so.
Thank you. Councilor Bell.
Through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Trouble, do we not have a lot of these rules already in our bylaws that states fencing, security cameras, 24/7 for medical marijuana operations, secure buildings, et cetera?
Through you, Madam Chair, the provisions are not as elaborate in our zoning as they are in the Health Canada standards. And obviously, the Health Canada standards vary depending on the type of facilities,
So then we can look at upgrading ours to,
certainly to be consistent with what Health Canada requires, yeah.
okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Treble, through to you. You read a line out there, and it started out with the essence of the zoning bylaw. Can you read that line again there, please? I think it says, is to allow for licensed cannabis. I think it is the heart and soul of this conversation here.
I'm not sure I actually read from anything, but Madam Chair, I think I know what I would have said, and that is that the bylaw as drafted is to allow for the licensed facilities, which is the higher standard ones that Councillor Ganan was referring to that have significant standards with respect to security, monitoring, 24/7 surveillance. And I think it's security not only by fencing, but also internal to the building in terms of where the storage of the product is to be and the whole bit. And it's not the language that we were dealing with the last time round where they just have to have strong locks and discrete operations, I think it was. So we've progressed, if we head down the licensed road, considerably beyond where we were dealing with before.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to Mr. Treble, if we were thinking about expanding the 45 meters setback to the lot line, not to the building, but to the lot line, we probably wouldn't be able to do that on a licensed marijuana cannabis production facility, simply because it already says that in the federal zoning bylaw. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know that the federal regulations talk about setbacks. With the exception, I know they are talking about setbacks for the sale. However, having said that, part of the reason for the distinction between the 45 and the 150 was an agricultural setback requirement versus an industrial park setback requirement, and the thinking that in the industrial park you wouldn't need as much land area, especially if the industrial park is removed from residential uses. Then you're not dealing with residences on the adjacent properties, you're dealing with other businesses across the lot line. Having said that, though, we will double check all of that stuff, or all of those provisions, I should say, with respect to what the licensed provisions actually say as part of our recommendation report back.
So one last question, Madam Chair. So if you were to implement, Mr. Treble, a hog barn, agriculturally speaking, what would be the minimum distance setback on that?
Sorry,
A hog barn?
A hog barn, okay. The setback varies dramatically depending on the size and scale. Some of the largest ones I had seen required up to a 2-kilometer setback.
2 kilometers, okay. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
I just have a couple of questions because I wanted to make sure that the questions that have been asked to me are posed to the staff. And one of them is the cannabis and marijuana in this new zoning bylaw are synonymous, are they not? Because we haven't changed them and we kind of interspersed them. So I know the regulations have changed cannabis, which seems to be, I guess, easier to spell in various ways. Marijuana gets spelled. C-A-N, is, there's no differentiation between cannabis and marijuana in this bylaw, is there, Mr. Treble? Or are we going to be consistent on the bylaw?
Through you, Madam Chair, the intent is to be, I think, consistent with what Health Canada is doing, and that seems to be heading down the cannabis terminology line. So the intent of the township staff is to use similar language to Health Canada.
So another question is security on group growing. So if I want to grow for 4 or find some way to have 2 portions to my property and I grow for 8, is there strengthened language that we could put in about those kinds of growing which I think is but better than a strong law in the weak growth that is currently suggested not being made?
Through you, Madam Chair, what staff are proposing, and it can be found at the top of page 9 in clause 3, sorry, the top of page 9 of attachment 2, which is page 99 of the entire package, is to say that unless you have proper zoning approval from the township, any growing is considered to be a prohibited use. So that gives us strong authority when we go before the courts to show that it is a prohibited use in our township zoning bylaw, and there's no gray area. It's
That's what I wanted to make clear. If you are growing cannabis for your own individual requirements, which is no longer legal and you have a permit, or small number of plants in your home structures, that's allowed through cannabis legislation. But anything, whether I'm growing it for people who are unwell, or I'm growing it because I have a federal license to grow in a structure that's got more definition, I need zoning.
that's correct.
The other question I have is about agricultural purposes and ancillary agriculture. In our rural areas, and while agriculture is deemed to be a good use of land, if a farmer wanted to put in a butcher shop or a facility for adding value to the crops they were doing, or just chopping wood and splitting it, they would be limited to 2 people for the ancillary to agricultural use. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, the provisions that limit to the number of employees is related to home industry. But if you're processing produce produced on the premises, that is not really limited because that's the sale of an agricultural product that's grown on site.
So the point is that processing cannabis, and that's what the point is trying to make there, is processing cannabis from a product of a plant to a dehydrated or processed product is a permitted use.
It's, through you, Madam Chair, it's considered to be part of an agricultural use, that's correct. And OMAF seems to be going down the road of considering marijuana, cannabis, whatever term you want to give it, to be an agricultural use, and are establishing experts in that field within their ministry, the same as they have for all of the different commodities and livestock groups.
So that really the way to structure this new bylaw, or the suggested changes to the bylaw is, I hope that, what I was really looking for clarification on those points, because a number of people are still a bit unsure. But our bylaw says if you're not zoned, clarification will come to the zoning.
It's not on? Okay. Sorry. The clarification will come through the application for a site plan and a zoning amendment.
That's correct, Madam Chair. If there is no site-specific zoning, it is not allowed. And site-specific zoning can only be granted through Planning Committee and Council.
Right. So every application will be before us.
Whether it has Health Canada approval or not, it still requires approval of local council.
Thank you. I think that's the essence of what it is we have before us tonight. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you. Councillor Ganan.
Okay, so just one more quick further to that with clarification. All of the information about having a license, being a licensed producer of cannabis for medical purposes, Health Canada information states that their assurances to Canadians that they're receiving a safe, quality, controlled product. It talks about secure and sanitary conditions, and somewhere in all of this, it also states in a couple of different places that we're talking about only indoor growing. So although it's looked at under OMAFRA, they're talking specifically for medical marijuana at indoor sites where everything is controlled, pests, humidity, anything that needs to be controlled.
Odor.
That too. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from anyone? Thank you very much. Seeing no other comments, we'll proceed forward. And that is that to advise the public and those with us this evening that this is a technical report that is being considered by Planning Committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future Planning Committee and/or Council. Please be advised that once the Planning Committee and Council have made their decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, if approved by Council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There is an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's meeting, that you place a check mark in the column marked medical marijuana / cannabis revisions if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on the matter. Therefore, anybody who is interested in observing council and/or committee meeting discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review the items that will be discussed at a council and/or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notice by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. I declare this public meeting regarding, the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw with regard to medical marijuana provisions completed at 7:30 p.m. Okay. Do you want to take a 2-minute break? Oh, I thought someone did. Okay, with regard to the next item on our agenda, that would be appointments. And the first appointment on our list, the only one for this evening, is Roger Lane and Roger Vaughn with regard to Legion Villa and the disposition of the former St. Martin Catholic School property. If you'll come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and provide us with the discussion that you wish to have. And if you've got a copy of it, our clerk would love to have it.
Members of council, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, allow me to introduce myself. My name's Roger Vaughn. I'm the chair of the Expansion Planning and Development Committee for the Legion Villas, and with me is Ron Lane. He is the president of the board of directors for the Legion Villa. Okay, I'll just read what I've written, and I do have a copy that I'll be able to hand to you. Okay. The Legion Villa is a not-for-profit charitable organization that provides affordable housing for seniors 55 and above in this community. We operate in agreement with Niagara Regional Housing, which allows us to offer subsidized rent to more than half of the units we have. We currently maintain 2 buildings. Villa 1 is 35 years old and consists of 30 units. 15 of them are subsidized. Villa 2 is 25 years old and consists of 32 units, with 21 subsidized. As mentioned in our letter to the mayor, our wait list has been growing rapidly since 2013 and is currently greater than 187. In 2016, the Expansion Planning and Development Committee was formed to investigate the possibility of building at least one more building to respond to this increasing need for accommodation for seniors. To this end, our committee has been investigating possible locations to build. Our aim is to have a location on which we can build by 2019. The former site of St. Martin's Catholic Elementary School is one that would be a suitable site on which to build. It also has the potential for establishment of a senior center in our community where programs and activities for seniors could be offered. We are aware of that need for such a facility in our community, and we are aware of others within the community that have also expressed that concern. The proximity of this building to a new Legion Villa 3 would be advantageous, and it would be easily accessible to other seniors in the community as well. Our vision for the school property is to build on the open land, building of approximately 60 units, and to retrofit the existing building in part or in its entirety into a community center for seniors. The size of the building could also be used to provide a location for a preschool program such as early years, which is a good fit for intergenerational activities. In short, we see this as an opportunity to work together to provide more affordable housing for seniors in our community, as well as provide a facility to house programs and activities for seniors in the area. We are asking Council tonight to send to the Niagara District School Board, or the Catholic District School Board, an expression of interest so we can work together with planning to prepare a bona fide offer. We are asking that you ratify this tonight as the deadline of June 5th is fast approaching. And we sincerely hope that the upcoming election does not impede this process. Recently, driving through Princeton, Ontario, I saw a sign that read, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." We sincerely hope that we can seize this opportunity to work together to formulate a plan that will change this wish into a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughn, and Mr. Lane for coming forward, and that is admirable, and we know that housing for seniors and affordable housing is a very important thing to this community. Just for the record, we did refer this particular item regarding the former school site for St. Martin's to staff at our last administrative meeting, and we're looking for a report to be coming forward this cycle to be able to give us all the options on whether it's the town or other members of the community wanting part of that facility. So I believe that our CAO is intending to do that so that we can meet the deadline. Am I correct? The green button.
It's on, okay, thank you.
This is a new thing for her, too, getting her to speak at meetings. So.
Microphones are very odd for me. Not at all. So I guess since we talked about this last time, that we received some new information at the staff level about some of the thoughts regarding surplus schools. So the director and I will be talking to some of the provincial representatives to learn a little bit about that as well. And we certainly understand your request. And so we have a little bit more homework to do, and our intent is, given the deadline, we will be coming back with a recommendation likely at, well, it will be at the next meeting, next committee meeting next Tuesday.
Tuesday, right.
Right.
So it's not like they're sleeping on it. There are options and there are things that might allow us to integrate you into our plans or whatever. There's a lot of different options, and rather than going through that tonight, I don't think we have enough information, but I think that staff's report next week might be appropriate. So come back next week and join us.
On Tuesday?
Come Monday if you want, but we're here too. Yes, on Tuesday. Sorry, Mr. Vaughn.
Do you need my...
Well, that would be great. So, yes, before you leave there, I was just going to ask if any members of the committee have a question. Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Vaughn, I need to know an answer here, so because it will decide whether or not I declare conflict of interest. As you know, I do sit on the expansion committee. And as I understand it, the expansion committee is only to make recommendation to the actual board of directors of the Legion Villa. So are you here tonight representing the Legion Villa or the expansion committee?
Well, I'm here representing the expansion committee. Ron is here representing the villa.
Okay, so from that point of view, I will not be declaring conflict of interest because we, on the expansion committee, we only make recommendations to the Legion Villa. That is correct, sir, right? Okay, so I would suggest to you in future, if a letter was to come from the Legion Villa, that you don't put your name to it, sir, that the Legion Villa Board of Directors put their name to it, as the expansion committee is only making recommendation to the Legion Villa Committee.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So just if in the future, so I guess what I was trying to say is if you could have Mr. Lane do the presentation as opposed to you do the presentation. Just keeps it cleaner that way. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation this evening. It puts the point out there, and as I said, we know that there are many pressures facing this community with regard to housing and affordable housing and appropriate housing. So, anyone wanting to see that presentation, you're welcome next Tuesday night. Okay, request to address items on the agenda. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience here present to address anything on the agenda, regardless of whether or not you have asked for an appointment. Is there anyone here wishing to address items on the agenda? This would be the appropriate time for anyone who wants to talk about any items that are on the agenda tonight. So the rezoning of, I believe you're going to say Wade Road? Oh, yes, this would be the appropriate time.
It's just, I was up here once before, and I'm just sort of reiterating, and I read the thing there, and I hope we stick to that, not to rezone, because I strongly oppose it. So just reiterating, like, I'd like to thank council for everything, too. You guys are very impressive, by the way.
I'm not sure, can I just ask you for your name and your address?
Glenn Davis, sorry.
Well, if we impress you, that's great.
It's just express my concerns about the application to rezone the lot beside me there. I'm on the defense of an expanding business that I feel should not be affecting a residence of better than 20 years. The applicant expressed she made a mistake in the purchase of the lot due to the zoning, but the applicant did know that the building erected was not a storage shed for skidoos, but did convey to the township that the building is like it's a full-fledged business. She tried to say they were just going to build it for storage, but they had a plan to put business there, and it is a full-fledged business. And so the business starts early in the morning. I get back at mornings, that's what I wake up to, early in the morning, and the crews get ready and they shift around and they drop stuff and then they go. But that shop is busy all day long because they have a bunch of equipment, and there's people there, they're there all day long, you know, and it affects me, right, in the mornings and stuff. You know, with the backups, the warnings and whatnot. So when Paige told me she made an error in purchasing a lot due to the zoning, I questioned her motive, because she's already shown me that they got that building erected under the guise of a shed, but it wasn't a shed, it was a full-fledged business. So she wanted lenience, saying, you know, I didn't know the zoning was this, but I don't believe that her mistake should be a 20-year residence problem. You know what I mean? You know, I spent 20 years there getting my lot ready. That's where I take my holidays. That's where I spend all my time. I'm going to retire in 10 years. I look forward to the peace and quiet and the tranquility there is what I look forward to. That business takes it right away. It really does. You know, and they tried to manipulate the Hamilton clause to get in there, so they've tried a number of different things. She says she wants to put a greenhouse there. All I can envision is my nice dark sky is already just lit up with the greenhouse beside me. It just takes away everything that I've planned and been enjoying. So, I mean, I feel that we have a good industrial park for them. They have opportunity here in this community and everything. And nobody would complain about them in an industrial park. But to rezone that, I think it's zoned just exactly the way it should be zoned. And it's been like that as long as I can remember. So I just wanted to express that and have you guys, people know that I am serious. So that, you know, like it means a lot to me.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Okay, thank you.
So
Mr.
Madam,
Treble, is that item?
that would be item P 7218.
That would be, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, there was someone else who wished, I'm sorry, that you're right, it is. It's item F. Hold on. 8F. There was someone else wishing to address committee? Did I see it? Please come forward. And if we could have your name and address first, that would be great.
I have Jack Smith, living at 120 Leslie Court. I've just written a package here. So this is in response to report PD 070-18, Wade Road removal of holding. This letter is on behalf of my wife and myself. We are writing this letter in response to the recommendation report received regarding the application of rezoning or removal of holding made by Phelps Homes Limited. We remain opposed to this severance application. As stated in previous packages, this parcel of land is under annual flood conditions. Not if, but only when and how much. It is our opinion that allowing a home to be built in this area is irresponsible and a certain risk to the township and its residents. Having made that statement, from the packages that we received, I understand that the Planning Committee has found they must recommend the issuance of a permit due to the applicable policies. I do applaud them for the conditions that they have added. However, I would submit that these conditions do not carry the teeth required to alleviate the risk that is being incurred. It is my understanding that this appeal is labeled as site-specific to this potential lot. I would like to remind everyone involved that the concerns are very much site-specific as well. In the NPCA 20 Mile Creek Watershed Plan, published in 2006, it's noted that the town of Smithville is an identified area prevalent with the karst topography. Now, I'm not a geologist. However, I understand that this refers to the very peculiar bedrock formations and drainage conditions in our area. Walking around outlying areas of our town, we see a number of sinkhole locations, so this karst environment is throughout the area. In fact, if you walk just 50 meters from the specific site that we're talking about, just on the east side of the walking bridge, 20 Mile Creek water flow will physically disappear underground in times of lower creek flow, leaving a dry creek bed while the headwater is still flowing. This tells us that there is indeed, in very close proximity to the lot in question, unknown underground formations that may or may not create an even more severe issue to the present lot or to existing houses in the area due to the disruption of the present water flow. This report even suggests that the karst features are within the urban area and can be considered in future development. A second point in the light of above, in the overview of the report that we received, it states that the home should blend in well with the neighborhood of single-family homes. We would ask that that statement be much clearer. Due to unknown underground issues, this home should only be permitted as a single-story bungalow without a full basement, or at best a raised ranch with a very shallow basement. The neighboring homes are not multi-story and should be better protected from any structure that doesn't fit the existing area. It's noted in the recommendations that the township is asking for a statement that protects them from liability of future flood. I would really have to question the capacity of such a statement. Once this home is built, a flood situation will not go back to Phelps as the builder, since at that point they would have received permits from the town of West Lincoln, from NPCA, etc. The legal responsibility will fall on the township, and I would truly hope that even as a township, we would not even find it accessible to tell a then resident that their purchased home, or that the home that they purchased in good faith, that they are on their own in the fact that their home was built in a space that should not have been allowed. Phelps will be out of the picture at that point. The question of insurance and liability has been brought up by other residents. We need to learn from the other townships that have faced these problems already. The town of Smithville is actually specifically tagged in this watershed report has been having some 40 buildings in the 100-year flood lines of 2005. So I really got to ask, how much risk are we willing to take? As a bit of an aside, I'm not sure if it's any responsibility that can still be tied back to Phelps, but as well on the walking path that presently runs south of the 20-mile creek. Just as an example of what flood conditions and the damages that can be done, that existing walking path has a number of locations on it where the current from the creek that has washed away the stone on top of the path. Large portions of stone are washed off the main path and into the grasslands beside the walk, causing an uneven surface, causing puddling and a poor quality path. I bring this up only as a small example of how a contractor will likely not be held responsible for a finished product, as well as potential damaging capability of a flooded creek. My last point would just be a note regarding the statements on the bottom of the township letterhead. All the papers that we received, it states the township of West Lincoln will be a community that values our heritage, preserves our environment and natural resources, fosters entrepreneurial spirit, and provides excellent quality of life. After reading that, it just seems to me that this is a statement, if this is a statement that is actually true, there is really only one option that we can do to preserve our town.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spence. Have you got a copy of that for the clerk?
Yep.
Great stuff. Is there anyone else present this evening that wanted to address any of the items on the agenda?
Hello, Madam Chairman, Council. I'm here for the Phelps rezoning on Wade Road. My name's Vincenzo Jimmy Renda. I can only say, like the people have spoken, the residents 100% not in favor of this. It's only millimeters away from the flood zone, and it's like the gentleman said, it's going to happen, but when, we don't know. I just don't understand. For years, we've been living there, and the mayor, everybody else has been saying it's a flood zone, and now they say there's an envelope. Now, I can't talk to my council, Terry Bell, because it's a conflict. I can't understand why it's a conflict, but there's rules and regulations. So he told me you must talk to Cheryl. So I asked Cheryl, and Cheryl asked me, what can I say? Speak for us. And I talked to Mr. Joyner, the mayor. He's always said that it's a floodplain. I just don't understand it. People across from the south side have built homes from Phelps, and they paid a premium, so no development will be built on that area. Now, I understand they're getting their premiums back if they build something there. I don't know. I just don't understand the NCA and the council recommend this. If they have a conscience, there's a floodplain there. The hammerheads, all this fences and everything, it's like the gentleman said before, like it's just going to ruin the whole property. And they're saying that, when I keep on reading about this, they're saying the other part of the land is going to be donated back to the city, back to the town, and they're saying Leslie Court can go to the floodplains. And so how about the rest of the city? How do they get through there? They got to cross the creek to go in there? I'm totally embarrassed and shamed. I just hope that the council will turn this down. One other thing, with the no trespassing sign there, like what happens now? It says that if they build, they give the no trespassing sign off. So if kids go there now, what am I supposed to say to the kids? Walk there, or, like I just don't get this. 10 years have been maintaining the grass, the neighbors, everybody been taking care of it, beautiful, and now it's, for years, this is going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jimmy Renda.
Valerie Izzy, 198 Margaret Street. I just wanted to know, at the last meeting, there was mention about a geotechnical survey done on the property to make sure that it could withstand a building. Has there been anything on that?
Mr. Treble, I don't know. The building envelope has been the result of a series of studies. So the studies that identified out the setback from the floodplain, as well as top of bank and the stability of the land, have they been received by the township as yet?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are a number of studies that were done mainly of a mapping nature. I'm not aware that a geotech has been done, but certainly under the building code is required should the chief building official be concerned about the stability of the soil. So I think it would be premature to be done yet. It would be done at the time of a building permit if required.
So maybe if we could just say, if I decided to have, if I have a residential lot on my farm, that doesn't mean I get a building permit, is that correct? Like if someone has a lot that was created, or it's there, if I'm to produce studies before I get the building permit, like geotechnical, or setback from top of bank, or floodplains, et cetera, it would take input prior to that building permit for me to get. I might have a lot, but I may not be able to get a building permit. Is that correct?
You would need to do studies and submit them in support of your application before you would get a permit.
Right. So there are lots in West Lincoln that can't be built on?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think, so some of the studies haven't been done as yet or haven't been provided to the township. Those will be provided as the process goes forward.
Okay. Just because if the land is too soft and they still want to build a building, they're going to have to end up putting piles in. They're going to have to drive piles in. So that's a concern. And if you're going to allow an application or agree to have a house built and then do the technical survey, then I think it needs to be done prior to agreeing to have a building built, if that's the way it's going to go.
Floodproofing is a very expensive venture, but it can work, so I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There was someone else. Oh, sir?
So, thanks, Madam Chair. My name is Pete Krieger. I'm with the Region of Niagara, and I have a copy of the presentation that you, I believe, all have in front of you. Very briefly, I'll keep it very short. My presentation is related to the Niagara Road 12
Go ahead.
landfill site and a berm that we would like to construct on the property that's directly north of our existing property. So just for a little bit of background, as most of you would know, there's a little bit of history to the site in that it was formerly run by the township. The region took it over. We're just conducting normal operations, and we're developing a new cell. So we have to dig cell 4. We're generating soil, and we need somewhere to put it. We already have 2 existing stockpiles on site. Adding to those stockpiles would be pointless because they're actually on the footprint of the landfill, and at some point in the future, we're going to have to move them. So simply put, as you can see on the slide, we have about 77,000 cubic meters of soil that we would like to move. Analogy, about 7,500 truckloads. 50% of that will be done this year. 50% will be done next year. We staged the cell construction in 2 stages so that when we construct the cell, we can get enough waste on the liner so that it protects it from the frost in the winter. So we found in the past that when we construct too much of it, it's just simply not doable. We've sampled the soil that's there to verify that it's clean, and it's all clean. It's native soil, so we're just moving native soil from one location to another. And what this will provide to the region and the residents of West Lincoln and beyond is 10 years of additional waste disposal capacity at this site. So just the next slide was just an excerpt from the report that you have, PD 082-18. So it's just a,
Jim, if I could just stop you, it's item P74-18, item H, that you're speaking to, sorry. It had originally been under consent. We pulled it so that you could speak to this.
okay.
Thank you.
So the majority of the berm would actually be located on our existing property, but there is some that would extend beyond the north property boundary. So essentially what we're asking for is the ability to encumber 40 meters of property north of our landfill site to accommodate this additional soil. You have a plan view in front of you as well as a cross-sectional drawing of that, which is further explained in the report. And just for illustrative purposes, I've included a couple photos. This is one that we did at one of our landfills in Welland. We did this in combination with the parks manager there for the same essential purposes we're doing here. It serves as a great visual buffer to the landfill site. The subsequent picture is what we currently have at Niagara Road 12. There is an existing 4-meter berm that has an extensive number of coniferous plantings on top, which we don't want. We could have essentially put it on top and kept it on our own property, but we don't want to cut down all those trees. There's 2 large oaks that are also in the field there, which we're going to avoid as well, and we're going to place the soils between our existing berm and those 2 large oaks that are out there in the field. So just in closing, we've consulted with the MOE. What we'll do is we've already sampled the soil. It's clean. We're going to amend our ECA to identify this as part of the landfill site, even though it's just soil, but to make sure that it's properly registered on title with this site. During construction, we'll place silt fencing around it. We're obviously going to seed the berm upon completion. And as I've just previously noted, it'll provide a great visual buffer to the site. It'll be about twice as high as what's existing. So, there's still the opportunity at some point in the future. There's a nice flat part on the top of the berm that we could also landscape that berm at some point in the future if we choose to do so. But it will be grassed and covered as an initial step.
So thank you, Mr. Granger. So the reason that you're here is because the berm is actually going to sit outside the land designated for the dump, or for, a landfill. It is right now agricultural. Did I say that? Oh my gosh, with my outside voice. Sorry about that. This berm will sit on land currently zoned agriculture or farmland. Is that correct? And that's what really brought you here.
That's correct.
Because otherwise you wouldn't have to come here if it was all within the confines of the landfill site.
That's correct. If we could keep the berm within our landfill site property, then that's correct. We could proceed because that's what we're licensed.
But the township does have a site alteration bylaw since you've last done this. So we're glad that you, as the region representative, are here telling us about what you're going to do on land that's not zoned appropriately and asking for the appropriate consideration. And I do believe, Councillor Bell, did you want to speak to this as our rep on landfill site 12?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have spoke with Peter, and the land that he's taken is being used as agricultural. My understanding is it's regional land that's owned, so it's going to just be rezoned, so it will stay within the confines of the waste management site. And as he said, we're going to get 10 more years out of just that one cell alone. And there is, I believe, 4 more cells. There's 8 altogether. Yeah. So after discussions, this soil was originally going off-site to somewhere else. And it wasn't staying on West Lincoln, it was going elsewhere. But I don't have an issue with what's happening here, for the fact is it is regional land. It's staying in it. MOE is going to bring it back into governance, and there's no problem. It is clean fill that they're moving from one side to the other. So I'm good with it. This has been in the makings for probably the last year and a half or so, if not more. So
Thank you for that report, Councillor Bell. And I now have Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Bell answered a number of the questions. I used to sit on the Niagara Road 12 Landfill Committee a number of times as an alderman when we used to be called that. Just like the
How
dump-
things have
just like the
changed.
dump was another- I think it's called the Waste Management Facility now or something. It sounds really good. If you pick up the garbage, you're now a sanitary engineer. Anyways, with regards to the land, though, I was going to ask a question about that extra land, and that extra land belongs to the region. It's owned by the region anyways.
I'll,
Is that correct?
Through you,
please.
Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. It's owned by the region.
Okay, then the other question I was going to ask, of course, being a very kind of hot spot with the township right now, that's 7,500 truckloads of soil. Could have been a bone of contention, but it's now going to stay on the property. Is that not correct? Or if it's going to leave, it's going to leave the township of West Lincoln. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, all of the soil that's generated through the excavation of cell 4 will be in that berm.
So it'll all stay
All
on
the soil will
site.
stay in West Lincoln.
So that 7,500 truckloads will stay on site.
Yes, sir.
So nothing will be leaving. Okay, because that's important.
It's earth moving, not earth removal.
Okay. Yeah, but it just said truckloads.
I
When you say
understand.
truck, that usually means removal.
I know, but I think Councillor Bell made it clear that nothing was leaving. So,
Okay, so nothing's leaving, and that's important too. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Councillor Trombetta.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I was just wondering, the trucks that are moving the material, are they triaxles you're moving, you're using scrapers to move the material? How are you mobilizing the material? Obviously, there's 7,500, well, it says truckloads, but I understand but is it just with on-site triaxles, scrapers being moved? How's it operating to move the material from one site to the on-site there?
Through you, Madam Chair, the actual excavation of the soil will be up to the contractor. The hauling of the soil will more than likely be done with off-road trucks because a triaxle won't be able to navigate up and off of
Like
the
a typical
berms.
rock truck or something
A
like
rock
that?
truck, precisely.
Okay, that's my question. I just wanted to know if there was multiple trucks coming in using, obviously the roads and damaging roads, but that's.
There'll be
rock
all,
trucks on-site.
that's a great point. All of the movement of the soil will not be on any roads.
Perfect.
They'll be accessing it through our landfill site, going through the north fence and onto this property. They won't be navigating any roads.
That's a great answer. That's the answer I was looking for, that our roads weren't going to be getting access to get in and out. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Trombetta. Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, Peter, and thank you for the presentation. On page 3, the MOECC ECA will be amended to include the parcel. Do you need MPCA approval, or does the MOECC supersede that?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have another project that we will be working on next year. We'll be enlarging the storm pond. We went through NPCA for that because it was adjacent to the woodlot. Their comment at that time, as long as you're not impacting the drip line of the trees, an NPCA permit is not required.
Okay. And you will not be putting this berm on any PSWs?
That is correct.
Thank you.
The mayor is our representative on NPCA, so you can see everybody's specialties. Councillor Gannan.
Thank you again for your presentation. Just one quick question, and that has to do with the amount of dust that could or may be created through the movement of all this. Has there been consideration given to that? I know that the residents along South Grimsby Road 12 were very concerned when it went in the first place, so I'd hate to see another issue coming up. So,
Through you, Madam Chair, great question. As part of the contractor's responsibility, they are responsible for a dust mitigation plan, which I'm not going to suggest to anyone it's going to be perfect. We all know that construction projects are never perfect. However, what I will tell you is that just like our day-to-day operations, they are required to ensure that the roads are maintained, or the construction roads are maintained such that they are, I don't want to call it wet, but they maintain it in such a way that the dust does not become a problem, especially knowing that the prevailing wind directions out of the southwest could carry it in that direction. So
okay.
that's part of their plan.
The fact you've mentioned mitigation is good. So at least it's something on the radar and something that they're aware of, and if people ask, we know. So thank you.
So I was going to ask you whether you were using Volvos or off-road trucks. I wasn't. No, I just wanted to say, Peter, thank you for your presentation this evening. And not only are you extending the life of that environmental facility with what it is that you're doing in that cell. I think there's a lot of work that's been done by the region to convince people who are to recycle, to compost, and to, in fact, do things that will extend the life of all of the facilities owned and operated by the region. So I think that it's good work. I think we've already extended the life of that facility. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Councillor Bell, for pulling it and putting it on so that we could talk about it. And we look forward to working with you.
If I may just offer one more comment related to the trucks. There won't be any soil, but there will be granular that's being imported into the site with triaxles. There will be no soil leaving the site, but we will be importing. Just in case you see trucks, then you know we're not moving soil, we're moving.
You mean you don't want the bylaw officer out there saying, what's going on? Very
Just want to
fine.
make sure that was clear.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there any other individuals in the audience this evening wishing to speak to items on the agenda, because that is where we're at right at the moment? And if you could give us your name and address just for the record, sir.
Okay, my name is George Cervara. I live at 194 Margaret. And I'm talking about the Wade Street thing there. And good evening, Madam Chair and Mr. Mayor and Council. Looking at this report, has Council discussed this at all? Like since the last meeting? What's been happening since the last meeting amongst yourselves?
Okay, so we don't meet outside of here in a formal setting. If we see each other at an event, that might be there. But we speak as a committee here. And the last time we spoke about it, we gave direction to staff. They went away and came back with this report, which we all got on Friday, just like you.
Oh, okay.
And so now we're going to discuss it when the item comes up.
Okay, I just was wondering if you discussed it or not. Okay.
No, that would be a bad answer if I said yes.
Oh, okay. I don't want to do that. And also, on the attachments here, 3 to 6 are missing. Why is that? Like, you got 1, 2, and 3 on down here. Or 1 and 2 rather, and 3, 4, 5, and 6 are pages are missing.
Brian, pardon me, Mr. Treble, if you could.
Madam Chair, the reports that are on the side table are not complete. They are simply the report plus some snippets of the attachments. The entire package is available on the township website, but we did not print the entire report with the attachments because it would be some 50 to 60 pages in length. So we provided some of the drawings and maps that they can follow along when we have discussion later. Plus the report in its entirety is provided tonight at the side table.
The report in the main, that would mean just the report is there. The attachments and anything else, you'd have to go on our website.
Okay, very good then. Okay, well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I'll ask for one final time. Is there anyone else in the audience this evening wishing to discuss or in any way make comment on any item on the agenda? Seeing none, then I will move on to the consent agenda items. Items considered to be consent are routine and not controversial and can be approved by one resolution. Tonight we have a number of items. The consent agenda has 5, the first being an information report regarding guidance to support implementation of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2017, application for intensification and density targets, and draft technical guidance on municipal comprehensive review processes. All of these reports are included in our agenda, by the way, and if anybody wants them, they're on our website. Item 2 is information report regarding the final release of DiCarlo Homes Plan of Condominium. That would be the Vintage Collection bungalows on Grant Street. Item 3 is a recommendation report with 517604 Ontario, Alden Equipment, regarding the site plan authorizing bylaw for file 2100-005-18. The fourth item is recommendation report for Top of the Hill Farms. That's Niagara Pallet for an amending site plan authorizing bylaw for file 21-00004-18. And number 5 is a recommendation report for the naming of Brookside Terrace and Forest View Court in the Brookside Phase 3 by bylaw and issuance of certificate of completion of services and the assumption of streets and works for Brookside Phase 3 by the developer Phelps Homes Limited. The recommendation for those 5 items are that the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee hereby approves the following consent agenda items. Items 1 and 2 be and are hereby received for information. And items 3, 4, and 5 be and are hereby received, and the recommendations contained therein are adopted. Seeing no exceptions, I'm looking for a mover and seconder for those items. Councillor Gannan, Mayor Joyner. Comments from any members of committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Those items are carried. Okay, we move on to communications, and we have a couple of items of communication. The first being from Mr. Lyle Killens regarding tree replacement as part of an industrial wind turbine project, and the recommendation is the correspondence from Mr. Lyle Killens dated April 9th, 2018, regarding the removal and replacement of trees due to the construction of industrial wind turbines in the township of West Lincoln be received. I need Councillor Rayner, Councillor Trombetta. Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, I didn't get an and. I got to be received. I was looking for an and. The mover and seconder said received.
Doesn't say it's supported, just say received. If it was saying supported.
It was to be received. If, yet, no, okay?
There's no line for supported.
No, it's good. This isn't the one you're thinking of, Mayor Joyner. It's a little bit confusing this evening, yes. Item B. We did. I asked all in favor. I thought I saw enough hands, but all in favor again, just for the record. Amen.
Joined and never had
She votes for proxy. Okay, item P, the next item, P66-18. It's not even late. Mr. Ron Lane, President of Branch 393 of the Royal Canadian Legion Villa Senior Citizens Complex, is a request for Township of West Lincoln to send a letter of intent to purchase the former St. Martin's Catholic School property at 186 Margaret in Smithville. We've heard from these people in the presentations, but the recommendation is that the correspondence dated April 13th, 2018 from Mr. Ron Lane, President of the Branch 393 Royal Canadian Legion Villa Seniors Complex, requesting the Township of West Lincoln send a letter of intent to the Niagara Catholic District School Board regarding the purchase of the former St. Martin Roman Catholic School property, municipally known as 186 Margaret Street, Smithville, by no later than deadline date of June 5th, 2018, be received, and I presume, based on the discussion, be directed to staff. But I need a mover and a seconder, and I'll, Councillor Scanan, are you in favor of that and? Yeah. And Councillor Bell, and as amended, or as stated, and? Refer to staff. Comments? Mayor Joyner.
I'll be very quick, Madam Chair. I want to thank Mr. Vaughn, Roger Vaughn, and Mr. Lane for their presentation here today, and also for the clarification on the expansion committee that was given. I think it's a very good idea that we put forward an expression of interest for the St. Martin's property. There are many different purposes that we could give to that property. The one of building a Legion Villa there. A third Legion Villa is very much top of mind. The actual school property itself, there are many uses that the school could be used for. One, also, obviously of being a senior center. There's lots of work being done within the municipality to also look at other suggestions of how we can use that school too as well. Really, right now, all we have to do, and I believe that the CAO is doing, is just bide ourselves a little bit of time. One of the comments that came forward was hopefully that the provincial election doesn't come into play into this. Obviously, there is no provincial government at this time. Therefore, there's no Ministry of Education. But we are doing everything that we possibly can in order to bide a little bit of time and put forward this expression of interest. So once again, thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Thank you, Mr. Lane, on behalf of the Legion Villa Expansion Committee. Thank you.
Other comments? Thank you, and we'll look forward to hearing from staff. I think there's a lot of recommendations out there and a lot of potential uses that have to be considered, because that's why we sent it to staff. So, on the motion on the floor, all in favor? I'm looking. That motion carried. Okay, so we move on to staff reports. P67-18 is a technical report regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for Bar Creek Farms. The recommendation is that report PD 075-18 regarding Bar Creek Farms, file number 1601-005-18, dated May 14th, 2018, be received, and that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. I need a mover. Councillor Gannon, Councillor Bell. Comments? All in favor? That motion carries. P68-18 is another technical report regarding 911 public emergency reporting services addressing remediation of Dufferin Street, Suffolk. And the recommendation on that report is that PD 073-18 regarding 911 public emergency reporting services addressing remediation in Dufferin Street, Suffolk, Dufferin, Suffolk, dated May 14th, 2018, be received, and that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting once all agency and public input has been received. I need a mover for that motion. Mayor Joyner, Councillor Bilsma. Comments? Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've heard it loud and clear here tonight from the residents of Dufferin that they would prefer it to be called Dufferin Street. So, Mr. Treble, make it so, number one.
Other comments? I think subliminally it's already affixed in my mind as I put a street in there when I read the recommendation. But, so, all in favor? That motion carries. Item P69-18, another technical report, zoning bylaw amendment for the comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments, that PD 077-18 regarding comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments dated May 14th, 2018 be received, and that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting once all agency and public input has been received. Mayor Bilsma, Councillor Bilsma, Councillor Bilsma and Councillor Bell.
Did you put your name in already?
Okay.
You got your name in already?
Now we'll focus back on the report. I apologize for the slip. And comments beside that one. That one, seeing no comments, all in favor? That motion carries. Item P70-18, that is another technical report regarding the revisions to the medical marijuana provisions of the Township of West Lincoln Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2017-70. The recommendations are that PD 081-18 regarding the revisions to medical marijuana provisions of Township of West Lincoln Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2017-70 dated May 14th, 2018 be received, and that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting once all agency and public input has been received. Councillor Bilsma. Mayor Joyner. Comments? Councillor Bilsma.
Thank you very much. So at this time, I wanted to just ask a question. With respect to the bylaw, we're talking often about and I'm going to, through you to the director, through your chair to the director, we're talking often about a medical marijuana facilities, licensed facilities, and I'm wondering if we're even dating ourselves in this regard. Very shortly, the federal government is going to be moving forward with a plan and proposal with regards to the legalization of marijuana, which means it's totally legitimate, it would be totally legitimate to have a recreational marijuana facility. And or even just drop the designation altogether, that there would be any distinction between what is medically purposed and what is recreationally purposed. In fact, I didn't know there were so many sick people using medical marijuana. The proliferation of these operations seems to be a little bit of a precursor prior to the legalization of marijuana, and such that I have a strong feeling that many, maybe not all, or maybe all, I don't know, it's just a thought that I'm having, that many of these will be converted to a recreational marijuana facility or just a general marijuana, cannabis growing facility. So, while I think it's commendable to have these stipulations necessarily for medical marijuana, perhaps we should just look at dropping that prefix, medical, and prescribing this for all cannabis growing operations or production facilities or whatever, because I'm concerned that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, why go through the process of a medical when we're just going through the crop called cannabis growing? Because it's historically, these facilities have been allowed for medical purposes, but if recreational or the legalization of marijuana happens, as the federal government is desirous to do, the point might be moot. So so that's through you to the director. Is there any merit to just dropping the prefix or the designation that it's medical marijuana and just applying it to cannabis growing facilities in general, recreational, medical, and the like?
I'm going to give this to the director, yes, but I think we need to be very careful that we can only license which is legal. And right now, maybe there's not recreational facilities out there to be licensed. But anyway, Mr. Treble, would you like to enlighten us?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, there's changes a brew. I think that's
That's
a fair statement. I don't know that we know necessarily what the rules are going to look like once recreational use becomes legal. But staff are in discussions with Township Legal Counsel to try and keep on top of the latest. The bylaw that's been drafted, subject to some changes per the discussion in public tonight, still reflects what staff and legal counsel feel is most appropriate under the rules in existence today. Having said that, though, we're certainly on top of what is happening, and the moment we have an idea of whether something as simple as dropping the word medical is appropriate, we will let you know. I had heard at one point that some provisions on that were going to be in place by July, but I think that's been bumped till August now, or maybe even later. So it's a bit of a moving target, and we're trying to stay on top of it.
Thank you. That's sufficient.
Okay. Sorry, my computer's deciding to have an update here. I got it. It's okay, thank you. Okay, so having heard all of that, we have on the table before us the recommendations with regard to revisions to a medical marijuana provisions. I put those, didn't I? Yeah. And they were moved and seconded. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? All in favor? Those opposed? Okay. That motion carries. Okay. Item P71-18, a recommendation report with regard to Wade Road removal of holding residential R1B zoning and OMB appeal. Part Lot 8, Plan M97, the OMB file PL 17170-875. Related Township File B10/2017 West Lincoln. The recommendation on the staff report being brought forward tonight is, one, that report PDO 70-18 regarding Wade Road removal of holding residential R1B zoning and OMB appeal Part Lot 8 Plan M97 OMB file PL 170875, related township file B10 / 2017 WL dated May 14th be received, and that a change in the zoning of a portion of the property as shown at attachment 1 be supported to rezone from environmental conservation EC to residential low density R1B as per attachment 3 to this report, and that minutes of settlement be prepared by Township Legal Counsel to reflect this proposed zone change with the following conditions. That the remaining land surrounding the building lot be conveyed to the ownership of the Township of West Lincoln, and that the size and configuration of the area to be rezoned be reduced in depth as illustrated in attachment 3, such that all lots fronting onto Leslie Court have direct connection to the ultimately township-owned floodplain lands, and that a restoration/landscape plan be completed and approved by Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, with recommended works being completed by Phelps, and that a development agreement be signed in order to ensure street extension, hammerhead, sidewalk extension to the walking bridge, street lights if any, hydrants if any, cash in lieu of parkland, and chain link fencing of the township-owned lands, if required, are installed to the satisfaction of the Township of West Lincoln prior to a building permit being issued, and that Phelps Homes provide a statement to the Township of West Lincoln that protects the township from any liability should the basement of the new dwelling be damaged in any way from flooding or heavy rain, and settlement occur without cost basis, and that a bylaw be signed to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the corresponding minutes of settlement, and that the proposed settlement be presented to Phelps Homes Limited for consideration, and that should Phelps Homes Limited concur with the settlement proposal, Township Legal Counsel be and are hereby authorized to contact the Ontario Municipal Board and inform them of the solution that has been reached once all documents are signed by both parties, and that the township understands that the neighboring property owners will wish to present their arguments to the Ontario Municipal Board, and Phelps Homes Limited shall be required to provide appropriate responses to the Ontario Municipal Board. That is the totality of the recommendations. I need to, yes, this particular item is Councillor Bell's conflict of interest, so he will not participate in any way with regard to this item. I need a mover. To put this on the table, so this is an item before the Ontario Municipal Board at this moment. We are, in fact, putting together a proposal that for minutes of settlement to be prepared if this carries. So we are putting it on the table for discussion. There is this motion will not approve it. It is just put on, and once we finish discussion, a vote will be taken. So I need a mover and a seconder to put the item on the table. Councillor Bilsma and Mayor Joyner. Okay. I am now accepting a speaker's list, perhaps, for this item. Councillor Gannan. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you wanting to speak at this point, Mr. Treble, or you just wanted the picture up?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I thought someone had asked. Okay, Councillor Gannan, you're first on the speaker's list.
Okay, shall I start?
Please do.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a few concerns about this, and since this meeting is technically planning, building, and environmental, I want to address some of those things that are my concerns. So, since being established under the Conservation Authorities Act on April 30th, 1959, making it now close to 60 years old, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, or the NPCA, has been historically trusted to follow its mandate to, first of all, improve the quality of lands and waters. Secondly, contribute to public safety from flooding and erosion. Thirdly, provide for the acquisition of conservation and hazard lands. And fourth, enhance the quality of life in its watershed by using its lands for recreation, heritage preservation, and conservation education. in spite of such things as the stories that are told around here about various farmers who've had what seemed like stringent rules placed upon some of their farmlands, or remembering back to 1990 when the Vanderbrinks were held captive by the NPCA in the eyes of many people in town as they tried to build their dream home, we've accepted over time that that authority was making judgments, although we necessarily did not agree with them, at least we felt that they were qualified conservation expert opinions. Part of the frustration, I think, now of the residents, and for me as well, is that in Smithville, we've always had the understanding of the risk of the 20 Creek flooding capabilities. The idea of the 1 in 100-year floodplain was used in the Vanderbrink issue to build as far back as 1990, and as late as 2007, the latest mapping of the 20-mile creek was done, and it still indicated the dangers of the flooding of the 20-mile creek. So there seems to have been some kind of urban myth regarding our protection or safety from flooding as people in this municipality have discussed the 20-mile creek. We seem to think that the NPCA was going to protect us from the possibility of that happening in West Lincoln. And over time, as stated in their mandate, you know, that is one of the things that they are supposed to do. But I feel like in the last while where they've looked at acquiring conservation lands and looking at larger scale conservation projects and education for young people, that they seem to have lost sight of the smaller scale vision, our grassroots vision of what conservation of land seems to be. And so, Mr. Treble, I really do have a question at the end of all of this, but I realize that you're not an authority on NPCI business, but you are our Director of Planning and Building. So I'm wondering if you can cast some light for us on what has changed since 2007 in regards to that latest mapping and what they thought the floodplain was. And I'm wondering if the region and the NPCA have relaxed or changed their standards somehow unbeknownst to the rest of us who live in West Lincoln. So,
Mr. Treble, could you address that?
Through you, Madam Chair. There's a lot covered in that question.
There was a lot, and I appreciate it. I'll break it down anytime you want.
No problem. I'll speak to what I can, and as Councillor Ganan has alluded to, I'm a planner, but I don't consider myself an expert in the kind of mapping techniques and understanding that the Conservation Authority has. So planners at the township level and the regional level both rely on the expertise of the Conservation Authority. So, and has been identified, the Conservation Authority has been around for a long time. Perhaps just to paint a little bit of a picture of history, because it was helpful for me, so I'm hopeful it's helpful for others as well. Leslie Court and the lots fronting Wade Road in this particular area were created in the mid-1970s. We actually still have the planning file, and it was a provincial approval at that particular point in time, and most of the planning work appears to have been done by the region on the township's behalf in this file. But the lots that were created in the 1970s, as people in this room reside on those lots today, were created actually before the floodplain mapping. So the one point I think it's important to understand is the rear of the lots fronting Leslie Court and the southerly lot line of Mr. Renda's lot do not reflect in any way the boundary of, let's say, the floodplain or whatever sort of environmental line. In fact, the planning report of that day says basically we're approving this because we know it's far enough removed from the 20-mile creek that it is not anywhere near any of the environmental features, and it says that the floodline mapping of 20-mile creek is expected later this year, and that's in this report from 1975. So they granted approval of the lots in this subdivision without floodplain mapping, but with an understanding that they were far enough removed. So at that particular point in time, there was no floodplain line to know exactly where or how close or how far south you could actually build through this area. I would assume that there was mapping done sometime after 1975, but the mapping that's most relevant today is from the 2007 vintage. So there's been changes presumably that have occurred in the meantime. The 2007 mapping, to jump forward, is not illustrated on this particular drawing, but is somewhere outside the lighter gray or whatever color you want to call the area that's labeled the Part 4 building lot, and is inside the darker area that is identified on the drawing that's on the screen to the side and on the screen in front of each of the councillors. So the proposal or the concept is that if the darker green is to be not developed, somehow stay away from potential development, then the lighter area is where it's outside the regulatory area and therefore could be considered for development purposes. And the Conservation Authority is of the opinion that it's removed from the area that needs to be protected for environmental purposes. The building lot concept was initially, I think we discussed this at the meeting last month, was initially indicated by the Conservation Authority that they would not want to even have a say over a building permit that would be issued inside that area. However, there have been some staff changes at the Conservation Authority, and the planner that we are now speaking to has indicated that at the time of a building permit, they would like to see the application so they can review the building permit before it's issued. So that's a slight difference between the public meeting last month and the position of the Conservation Authority today. But it is still outside their regulatory area. They just want to see it to ensure that it complies with all of their rules. I'm not sure if I've covered everything, Madam Chair, but that's perhaps a start. I think the other piece that I would like to say, from planning's perspective, it's important that we look at what is considered to be good planning at the broader public interest level. And to do that, we have a number of policy sets that we're obligated to implement. The environmental piece is certainly one major component of provincial policy, but there's a number of other factors that we have to look at as well. We have to look at the ability to accommodate growth and intensification inside areas on full municipal sewer and water services to the highest and best use possible, protect the agricultural lands and the environmental lands. In the agricultural area, we're also supposed to protect aggregates and gas wells and gas pockets and whatnot. So there's all sorts of different policy sets that planners have to work with on every given day, and they don't always align perfectly beside each other. There's a lot of overlap that you'll find between the different sets. So planners in our review have taken seriously the concerns of the community that we have heard, as well as the concerns of the applicant who has expressed a desire for a building development here, and the comments of the Conservation Authority, and landed on the report that's before you, which attempts to protect environmental features and accommodate development that is in keeping with the area. So one single-family dwelling inside a single-family neighborhood. But to do so, there are some changes that have to occur to the existing road network and to the sidewalk network in order to accommodate access to the property, as well as to provide safe access for pedestrians to the walking bridge. And perhaps, Madam Chair, just one other point to put on the record, which is not directly in line with anything that Councillor Ganan mentioned, but there is no concept to remove the walking bridge. It would remain as a walking bridge on this particular road allowance feature. Perhaps at that I'll stop it and
I think you
turn
should,
it back.
because nobody asked us yet about the bridge.
Okay, so stop there because I'm not finished, so that's good. So the heart of the issue then, Mr. Treble, is that Phelps, as owners of the property, appealed to the OMB regarding the zoning of this property because of our comprehensive zoning bylaws that were passed last spring, and that's correct. Am I? Is that how this came about at this point in time? So what I'm wondering, in actual fact, is since the time and effort was put into that, I'm wondering, was the NPCA asked at that time for input before the completion of those comprehensive zoning bylaws?
There's sort of a two-part answer, Madam Chair. back in 2011, which was when the first deliberations started to occur about the land north of the creek, but were mostly focused on the land south of the creek, the Conservation Authority said at that point that they needed additional information in order to be able to look at whether or not there was a building site on this property. As we worked through the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, that additional information had still not been provided. So the best advice the Conservation Authority was able to give us, in the lack of the information they were looking for, was that there were 2 layers of protection that should happen in this particular area. One is an environmental protection zone, which is basically a very high level of protection that should be put on areas that should never be developed. The second is an environmental conservation, or EC zone, which should be placed on areas that are lesser in their importance, but still environmental in their nature. And that's what this particular area where the potential building envelope is identified is. The darker green is mainly an EP, or an environmental protection zone, in that comprehensive bylaw. The lighter green is an environmental conservation zone, or a lesser standard of green, but the right recommendation in the absence of those studies that were not done at that time.
So in looking at the kinds of things that they would look at, would they also have looked at the karst topography, as was mentioned by one of our residents? Is that the kind of thing they would also have to be looking at, as well as the flooding or potential flooding of the area?
The Conservation, through you, Madam Chair, the Conservation Authority has done some analysis of karst topography, but it would be an independent analysis, not really tied to what they needed to do here. They needed to map the regulatory flood line, they needed to map the provincially significant wetland, and they needed to map fish habitat. Those are 3 that come to mind that were important features that needed to be mapped in this area. And that work occurred after Phelps appealed our comprehensive zoning bylaw. Their appeal was in July of last year.
Okay, I'll leave that for now. Thank you.
I have Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been very difficult for me, this whole file here. And you're speaking to a mayor who's lived on South Street and South Street Mill. So I've been around the 20 Mile Creek most of my life. And as a young boy, I swam in the 20 Mile Creek. As a young boy, I caught crayfish in the 20 Mile Creek. So I've even been down at the end of South Street and Mill Street to see my father on the end of a fire hose at the Acton residence when it flooded, and they went there to pump out the basement, and he was 12 feet, 15 feet in the air hanging onto a hose as a firefighter and couldn't let go of the hose. So I know flooding. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I was actually the first house as you come down Old Texaco Hill or South Street, as we know it, the first house on the right, and I saw the water right to the end of my driveway. I understand flooding along the 20 Mile Creek. Behind Buck Edwards' house, by the old creamery, we used to swim, and we used to start at Mill Street and go all the way down to the creek. There was so much water down there. There's a hill down there. We now own the property next to the Legion Villa. I understand flooding. So this has been a very difficult file for me to get my head wrapped around. And Mr. Schmidt is he's exactly true. He's done his homework. He knows about the karst features and the karst topographies. Where is he? There he is right there. He understands that. Councillor Gananis brought it up. To be honest with you, there were caves at one time and Blue Ribbon Estates, which is now we refer to as Autumn Circle and Swayze Court. And you can actually get into those caves and walk southward underneath Highway 20 and come out behind the United Church. So karst is a real thing, karst topography in the township of West Lincoln. And when Mr. Schmidt says that water comes and then water just disappears, he's absolutely correct. It does. There are caves there. There's no question about it. So what Mr. Renda says, and I've known Jimmy for a while, I feel a pleasure to call him Jimmy. He said at that time, I think I was a councillor or an alderman, as Councillor Rayner says. He said, no one's ever going to build there, right, Councillor? Alderman? And I said, nope, not as far as I'm concerned. That's floodplain. And that's what we always thought that area was. We literally did think it was floodplain. So to be honest with you, when the developer came and said, we own all of that, and we want to put a parcel, we want to put a house on that parcel of land, It absolutely blew my mind. There was no way in hell that I thought a house could ever go there. Now, to say, when you want to talk about where the residents of Leslie Court and Edward Court, as the director said, previous to the 70s, that was a field. There was nothing there. Actually, I'm not sure who's older than me in the room right now, but I believe it was when the 20-mile road was developed.
No one was older than you.
You're right. When the 20-mile road, which was a Kings Highway, Regional Road 20, was developed back in the 70s, they took a lot of fill and they put it into that property right there, which created those two roads, Leslie and Edward Court. So did the water come up on there right up to Highway 20? Yes, it did, previous to probably to 1970. So that's why the director says there was no floodplain mapping that was done in that area. There's a lot of history here. There's a lot of back history. I'm third generation. My kids are fifth generation. The joiners have been here since the early 1900s. That doesn't matter today. All I'm saying is the history is there is a lot of history along the 20-mile creek. But it's very difficult to think that a developer would actually want to put something there. So as hard as I tried to and put this down and not see it for what it was, I've tried very hard to say, this is floodplain land. There's no way that a lot could be put there. But the MPCA and the planning department has shown the floodplain mapping line. And we do floodplain mapping all the time. We're totally involved in it right now along the Welland River. And we want to increase it, to which we're getting a lot of pushback to increase the floodplain line. So in this particular case, I don't want to believe it, but I believe that at this particular time, the planning department of West Lincoln is come up with the best scenario for this particular area. And I know that's what residents don't want to hear. I know that's what Mr. Renda doesn't want to hear. I know that a lot of the residents there have been cutting that grass down there for years and years and years, and it's been a beautiful little oasis back there. But unfortunately, Phelps owns the land. They've done their homework, and they want to put a lot envelope there. I don't agree with it. I think probably many councilors around this table don't agree with it. But at the end of the day, it's before the OMB, and there's not a lot that we can do about it. And quite honestly, my next question through you, Madam Chair, will be to the director. Mr. Treble, if we deny this as a council, what then is the next steps for the Township Planning Department?
Mr. Treble, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. If the report is denied, then council still has to defend the appeal to the OMB that has been submitted by Phelps Homes. And I would anticipate that council would discuss with legal counsel the required evidence that would need to be submitted with that kind of a defense. The comprehensive zoning bylaw was approved by the township. It is a good document. We were doing some housekeeping to it, but it's a good document. But to defend that document would be, I think, the obligation of this council. And to defend that would mean that you are saying, no, the EC and the EP zoning that was put on that property is appropriate. And right now, there's really no planning evidence that supports that position. So council would be presumably seeking legal advice and a planner to help defend that position, should that be the decision of council.
So through you, Madam Chair, so we would be seeking our own legal advice and our own planning advice, which means that we could not rely on the planning advice of you yourself, Mr. Treble, because we have gone against your recommendation. And in saying that, there would be no planning evidence for us to go forward as a council.
I think you need to stop there. I think that the planning
Potentially.
director should answer that, but he's just answered you in saying that you have a bylaw that has got zoning on those properties. And no one has given you the planning advice that you need. Mr. Treble is not supporting that, but the bylaw still stands. Correct, Mr. Treble?
That's correct. Yeah.
The comprehensive bylaw 2017-70 is in effect, except that this property is under appeal. The mapping that was put in that bylaw was mapping based on, as per the questions from Councillor Ganan, was based on the information that the Conservation Authority had at that time. Conservation Authority has reviewed additional information and is suggesting that a building lot on this property is appropriate. So they would, I don't believe, be prepared to stand and defend the EPEC, but that would be a question that would need to be posed to the planning staff at the Conservation Authority. Staff sitting before you here tonight are not recommending the full concept that Phelps Homes has put on the table. We're recommending an adjusted concept that reduces or shrinks the area of the buildable lot. And I think we have a drawing that shows where the proposed line is that staff are recommending, which means that more of the land can be conveyed to the township and made available as public land, quote unquote. I know the community has enjoyed this land for years, but technically speaking, it is not public land in its current form. So to leave the status quo in place means that it stays as private land in the ownership of Phelps Homes or whoever might own it in the future. And in theory, they could go and fence the property and keep everybody off of it and make it pasture land. I don't know if that'd be a good idea inside an urban boundary, but take it out of the enjoyment that clearly it has had over these years. So I guess our recommendation is trying to legitimize some of the enjoyment the community has had and leave the one lot that Phelps seems to be proposing. So as you'll see in the screen that's projecting onto the sidewalls as well as in front of council, rather than going the full extent of proposal on the right-hand side, which is effectively 3 lots back, we're suggesting that it could be cut back such that the 3rd lot is completely unrestricted from the buildable lot. The 2nd lot is such that it has a small amount of frontage into the public space, with the remainder being part of a buildable lot. I believe the area that is likely to be the building area is set back behind Mr. Renda's house, towards the sort of starting at perhaps the rear wall of Mr. Renda's house in an area or a cluster of trees. I think that's generally what's viewed as potentially the building envelope. And it's inside a cluster of trees at this particular point in time, which is presumably going to have to be cleared. But in roughly the area where the hand is, I think, shown on, I'm not sure, can council see the hand?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it is up there as well on the map on the left-hand side. So that, we believe, is roughly where a building envelope might be. We have asked Phelps Homes if they have actually mapped anything out or anything they could map out on site. And the answer I got back was that they are likely to be doing a custom home, so they really don't have a layout that they can put on site right now. Hence the reason why you sort of see that dotted outline pattern entitled building envelope. That's kind of what the zoning setbacks would require on that type of land.
Mayor Joyner, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in essence, Mr. Treble, then you're proposing that lot 15 and 16 as far as lot 18 goes back to, and that the Phelps, even though they own it, that they don't continue to the west, covering over lot 18. And the reason for that is why, sir?
The reason for that is that we're suggesting that shrinking the size of the building envelope or the building area, the building lot, the private lot, whatever you want to call it, means there's more land that can be put into public ownership and therefore public enjoyment.
And public access.
And public access. That's correct.
Okay.
And just, if I may, Madam Chair, on the map on the right-hand side, you can see the storm outlet marked, and that's kind of where the lot starts. So anything between there and the bridge would actually be frontage, public frontage onto Wade Road as well. It's not like it's a sort of a locked-in piece that only is accessible by the residents of Leslie Court. It is accessible by Wade Road as well towards the south. I realize it's probably not, it could be rougher terrain, but it is certainly fronting onto the Wade Road allowance. It's not easy to say.
So through you, Madam Chair, this will be, Mr. Treble, part of minutes of settlement that you will go back to the Phelps Corporation and ask them for these changes and that teal-looking area there, the existing pedestrian connection and that teal area along there will be given over to the township so that the residents can have full access to the 20 Mile Creek. Is that correct?
The report as presented proposes that as the proposal to present to Phelps Homes. That's correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rayner. Is your mic on, Councillor Rayner?
The trouble is, this phone is
Now on.
so you can't see the light anymore.
Sometimes that's good, especially if it's a big white one. Anyway.
Thank you. This has been before us a number of times, and every time the residents have come. And I guess the part about this that bothers me the most is the fact that the residents, under good faith, have looked after this property as if it was their own. And then now there's no trespassing signs, which to me is really in your face, which is not good PR work, especially for a company who makes a lot of money in the township of West Lincoln on selling their product. I think it would go against most marketing 101 courses you could take. So this is a difficult situation on how far do you go. Mayor Joyner really gave a broad view of the situation and I think put it into perspective that 20 Mile Creek is basically unpredictable, and as anything unpredictable, the flood line could go, I mean, 100-year floodplain doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen. It could be something far worse than that. And that's happened in the past before in some places that never expected to get flooding have got flooding. And we see that on the TV all the time. So I don't like to see this there. I don't understand why, with all the construction going on, they have to put one there. And I don't understand why they're going against a lot of the people down there, because it's just not good public relations. So I still can't support this. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's almost like I'm doing this because I want to be in your face, which just doesn't come across right at all. It's just the worst publicity they could have to the credibility of their company. And yet they're relentless in this. And I appreciate and understand what Mr. Treble and his staff are doing and trying to make it as less painful as possible. But, you know, if we've got to fight this, then I'm prepared for the fight. So I guess that's all I can say, because I can't see anything about this that's necessary. It's not as if that's the only lot they've got left in the township of West Lincoln and they have to do this. Sorry, I didn't hear what the audience said, but anyways.
They were just agreeing with you, Councillor Rayner.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think sometimes you have to take a stand regardless of what's against you, and hopefully common sense will prevail at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayner. Councillor Gannan. And Councillor Bilsma, is that your didn't want, Councillor Gannan's going for a second time, so I wanted to, no? Okay, that's fine.
Oh dear, I lost that too.
Here, I've got one here, I have mine.
Oh, I still have it. It's just the first time I sent it flying. So, Mr. Treble, I really do want to thank you for the very wordy explanation that you've given over time, but I want to just clarify. So, as things stand right now, the lot belongs to Phelps, and the private property issue is at play, which is why the no trespassing signs went up, because once it was public that it was private property, then there became a liability issue if it wasn't posted. Is that correct? So the public should at this time have absolutely no access on that side of the creek to the creek property. Is that how we stand right now?
Through you, Madam Chair, the property has been private forever,
For
I
a
would
long
expect.
time, but now it's sort
So
of,
it's now on the radar, and I would assume that's why signs have been put up. I've never been told why the signs were put up anytime recently, but ownership has not changed in some time. It's been private land in the ownership of Phelps Homes for several years, and the signs are more recent than that, but I don't know why that triggered.
so obviously that has offended some people, and perhaps rightly so, especially those who've been caring for that land on their own time and in their own way. And I think that's to be appreciated. However, my worry and the conundrum that I see here is that people are used to having access to that. And it concerns me that that access, no matter what happens, will be denied going forward if this stands as it is. So am I correct in what I heard, in that the only way really to have some access for the public to this property is if the minutes of understanding, what you're trying to propose to the developer is this compromise situation that your staff has worked so hard on?
That would be correct, through you, Madam Chair. We're attempting to make the land public so that this concept of trespass is taken away.
And so, connected to that, you've looked at some protection to the township. Now, I'm not fully versed, and I'm sure many people in the public are not fully versed on how this may play out. This is step one. This is the township coming back and saying, this is what we would like to see. And it's still tweakable, and we'll go back and forth with Phelps. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, if there was some support for the report or a variation of the report, then I would anticipate that Township Legal Counsel would work towards putting together minutes of settlement and reach out to Phelps Homes and or their legal counsel, more likely, to have those kind of discussions around whether or not there's a potential for a settlement in here. And I would fully anticipate that there would be details brought back before council with respect to a number of different factors. You'll see in one of the clauses, we make reference to hammerhead, sidewalks, streetlights, if any, fire hydrants, if any, fencing, those kind of things. So there'll likely be some discussion that would need to happen, and then further deliberation with committee and council, probably in confidential session at that point, I would assume, to hammer out some of that discussion. That's assuming that Phelps is even prepared to come to the
If they're
table and
prepared
have
to come
those
to the table,
discussions.
and that is a concern. I mean, I don't like that we have to be at this point, but I don't want to see, considering my kids also grew up playing along that creek, I don't want to see us lose the right to that area. I don't like how this has been done. I intend, sort of agree with Councillor Rayner in that regard. However, the end result of this looks like the potential could be no public use, and that I find that a little bit alarming. So I'm glad to have that clarification, at least on the fact that there is a possibility for continuing to have public access to that space, in spite of the fact that we're not very happy with how things have played out. Thank you.
Councillor Rayner?
I guess the part that puzzles me the most is this is a fight, a battle that's consuming a lot of time on behalf of the developer and of the town. For one lot, there must be huge profits in the building business. That's all I can tell you, because this doesn't make any sense to me. The amount of money that's being tied up fighting this, surely to goodness, it exceeds the worthwhile of building it and trying to sell it. This has got to be on principle, not on business profitability, and I don't understand what the principle is. Thank you. That's all I got.
Okay. Anyone else? I think I understand why the OMB is now going to LPAT. And I think it really goes down to LPAT will force municipalities and the people living in them to look at the plans, the overarching plans, and to have your fight there. And there won't be an OMB to start de novo hearings into the future. Because it's very hard, and because my neighbor has a 100-acre farm, and I've had the great joy of looking at his farm, and decides then that he's putting a barn up in front of it. I know that can't happen because of the setbacks and all the rest, but in my little world, my comparator is they took away something I had. And unless we own something, we can't be sure of it. And I find it very difficult to get to a place that is so conflicted and that is so lacking in a solution that would work. Having heard, I know there's always three sides to every story. A police officer once told me that. But somewhere in between all of what it is that's going down, you know, I heard assertions that people wanted to buy the property. I heard that people took care of the property, but it wasn't theirs, but the people spoke with the owner, and that somewhere, somehow, everybody thought they were getting along. Guess it wasn't there. What I see now coming before us is a compromised solution. I see an extension to an unopened road allowance, I guess, and some sidewalks. But what I see is garbage trucks that are going to turn around and children that are going to go jumping across that bridge, and they might not be able to jump in the water anymore, or fish off the whatever, and maybe we don't have to have firefighters pumping out basements or whatever, but I do see an accident ready to happen, because that's just where the kids run and frolic, and it ain't the way it was. And I guess every municipality has to go to that. But it certainly isn't a very pretty sight. It isn't a very pretty sight to have the kind of requirement, if there truly was a solution that provided for the financial retribution, maybe in those days. Maybe today it can't be had anymore, but because in today's world, the cost and value of that land is substantially higher, and maybe now the residents couldn't possibly afford what it's there. But what we find ourselves is now facing possibly trying to get minutes of settlement. We don't know the answer. We don't know whether or not the studies will show us that it actually has the capability of having a house put on it. And if it is, it might be very expensive, because it's going to have to be flood-proofed, and that's really expensive. And then we also don't have the fact that the respect for the businesses in our community is perhaps being a bit short-sighted, and that's sad. But what I don't want to lose, given it's been a settlement, and no one says that either side has to accept this, I understand some of my colleagues, and what it is that they're saying is they're trying to preserve the most of the access, because we could lose it all. And it could come down to a spiteful type of relationship that will carry on into the future and prevent. I've walked through there 1,000 times with little kids as long ago as 1 year ago, while they watch snapping turtles and stuff. And what breaks my heart is that may never happen again for another kid in this town. And that is sad. So it really kind of puts the onus on us to try and come up with a solution. It may not be the right one. It may hurt some people's feelings, but is it the one that is going to give us the best possible solution for those little Benjamins and Teddies that are going to be saying, let's go stop and look at that turtle. So I find myself, like the mayor and many others around this table, so terribly conflicted, because we're really trying to make a decision on something that we don't even know the landowner will accept and receive. So we're trying to make the best of a very bad situation. And I don't say that because I'm against development, but I'm going to say it here and say it now. We need to protect, we need to decide how we want to grow, where we want to grow, and make sure that we are very clear with how and what we expect before we allow growth to happen in this community. Because otherwise, if you got to wedge them in like this, it just gives us an idea of what the future could hold. And I say all of that because I'm terribly saddened to have been brought to this situation, and you might as well hear it from me right here, right now. So, there's no one else wishing to speak to this item. I think we've vetted and vented, and the item is before us. So now I'm going to stop talking and just say to members of committee or members of the public, whatever we decide here today is not an end, Mr. Treble, and I'm going to ask you, because it is a proposal you've put forward that doesn't have our bylaw. We're asking for a change to our bylaw. It doesn't say that the owner of the property has to accept whatever it is we're proposing, and it doesn't say that we won't be before the OMB trying to come up with a solution that works for everyone. Am I correct?
You are correct, Madam Chair, but we've attempted to identify what we think is good planning as best as we can find it in this
I understand,
place.
within the rules and the confines of the studies and the information available to you, you are forced to you've been put into a position to put this report forward for us, and that's where we find ourselves today.
That's correct.
I am now going to call the vote, now that everyone out there knows that what we're going to do. And I apologize, Councillor Rayner, for taking that moment just to make sure that everyone understood.
Madam
Okay?
Chair.
I know you're going to ask for a recorded vote.
Yes, ma'am.
I knew that was coming, sir. Thank you. So we are at the time to vote on this particular matter. Councillor Bell has declared a conflict, rightly so, and has not participated in the item and will not be voting on this. And I go to the clerk, please, now to call for a recorded vote.
Councillor Bilsma?
Opposed?
Councillor Gann?
I reluctantly support the bid for mediation, so I guess I'm in support.
Councillor Rayner? Councillor Trombetta?
Opposed.
Mayor Joyner?
In favor?
Councillor Chichak?
I'm opposed.
It is a 2-4, sorry, 2 for the recommendation, 4 against.
That item loses on a vote of 4-2. We move on to, thank you, members of committee. We move on to oops, where are we? Where are we, Joanne? Oh, yeah. Okay, we are on a item P72-18. That would be a zoning bylaw amendment for Gerald and Paige Kelt. The recommendations for that file are the report PD 074-18 regarding Gerald and Paige Kelt application for rezoning, file number 1601-013-17, dated May 14th, 2018 be received, and that Section 34, Sub 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that the application for zoning bylaw amendment 1601-013-17 submitted by Gerald and Paige Kelt be denied. I need a mover for that. Councillor Rayner, Councillor Trombetta, Mr. Treble.
Madam Chair, this morning we received at the staff level a written request which has been provided to the clerk, Joanne, indicating that they would like to have this matter referred back to staff, the applicants would, for some further deliberations. So there's been a request made by the applicant to have a referral motion back to staff.
For discussions with staff.
That's correct.
That's called the 11th hour. The motion sits squarely on the table.
I'll move to refer it then.
Hang on, I was just going to say, the motion sits squarely on the table. I'm at the mercy of this committee. Councillor Bilsma has said he would refer the item, which is an undebatable issue. But I want one point of clarification. I have a motion duly put and seconded on the table. Trombetta? Oh, you didn't?
No, the original motion.
Yeah. No,
That's what's
no, I mean, just before I look for a seconder to the referral motion, sorry, that's all I was doing. On the original motion, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, that's Rayner and Trombetta. the referral motion, before I even entertain it, I wanted to say, I have a motion duly put and seconded on the table. Madam Clerk, is this appropriate now to accept the referral motion from Councillor Bilsma? Is this the appropriate time? Clerk has adjudicated and indicates I too agree that this is not it is not inappropriate, and the motion by Councillor Bilsma, if he finds a seconder, is acceptable to both the clerk and myself. A motion on the floor. It went to it moved and seconded, can be overturned by a motion to refer, but I need a seconder first. Don't put your hands up in case you want to second it. I know, you can, once they get it on the table now.
Madam Chair, I'd like to second it, please.
That would be the mayor. So it is now, we have a motion for referral. I will accept a point of clarification, Councillor Rayner, but it's really undebatable.
Okay, in my years of experience, I thought that the mover and the seconder had to backtrack in order to make it on, or because it's already forwarded by the mover and the seconder, that has to be voted on, and then it can go the other way. I didn't know there was a third option.
I don't believe the second option exists, Councillor Rayner. A motion to refer overtakes a motion on sitting on the table. That's why I went to the clerk before I entertained it. Well, I wanted to make sure all of you guys were not going to jump on a chair challenge to the chair or anything. I wanted to make sure we had it in good order. So, Councillor Bilsma was in order. The mayor has seconded the motion. The motion is to refer. Now all we have to find out is if everybody agrees. If there's no other comments, did you want to speak to this, or are you voting?
No, I want to speak to it. Just because the only thing I can ask is timing.
Correct.
Okay, and so we're having this come back in the June planning meeting, correct? Mr. Trouble?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would agree that some sort of timing might be appropriate. The only concern I have with June is whether or not the change that they're presenting might require another public meeting. And I don't know an answer to that yet.
So, there you are. The reason for referral or request to not have it dealt with tonight was for the matter of getting sufficient time to make modifications that might alter the application so much that it would require another public meeting, which then would take us into the fall or December. So, having heard that,
Also, Madam, excuse me, Madam Chair, but I understand he's left right now, but we also missing Councillor Bell, who's all of a sudden disappeared as well. This is an important issue as well, so.
Okay.
yes, and he has the democratic right to do whatever he's doing. So he's not here right now. Look, there.
Long meeting.
So Councillor Bell is in the room.
Thank you.
We have an item that is being asked referred back to staff. We found out that the matter of timing to get the item for Mr. and Mrs. Kelt back onto the June agenda may not occur, as they may require additional time, and the changes they are recommending may in fact require a second or an additional public meeting. So we have the motion on the table to refer, duly moved and seconded, and I don't have any reason not to call the question now. So I'm going to call the question on the referral motion for Mr. and Mrs. Kelt. You can ask, I'm a table. Go ahead.
I'm just questioning whether you want me to put that June 11th meeting on, if possible, at least report back.
There must
With
be a
something
report
to
back.
say it has to be another public meeting. or-
There's a report back
Okay.
required in June.
Okay, so that's added to the resolution?
The motion
referral
to refer
resolution?
will be that it's referred back to staff with the requirement to report back on next steps at the June planning meeting. I know you're looking for that, Mayor Joyner, but the Director of Planning has said he may not be able to tell us the extent of the modifications required. He may have to report back and say, plan another meeting, which requires another 30-day notice.
So then you've helped me make up my mind in this decision.
I
Thank you.
thought so. Councillor Trump.
Madam Chair, I just think it's, this has been ongoing for a long time. At the 11th hour, they come in and ask, and they throw this at us at the 11th hour, and now all of a sudden we gotta go back to a
So I have a
public
motion to refer on the table.
meeting. I understand
And if you
the
don't like
policy.
that,
I'm just stating-
let's
I'm
turn
stating
down
it-
the
I'm
referral
stating a
motion.
I understand how it works, Madam Chair. I'm just stating a comment.
I
need
know.
to get there. I
I
haven't
think-
spoke much tonight, so please grant me that democratic right to
I am
speak.
trying real hard, Councillor Trombetta, I'm just trying to follow the rules, but I think everybody's trying to get what it is you're saying.
Thank you.
Motion to refer is on the table. All in favor of the motion to refer back to staff, with a report to come to the June planning meeting, although we don't know what the report will be. All in favor? Councillor Billsmat, one. Contrary minded? All against? Well, I just wanted to make sure. I could have had a lot of people, doing something else. That motion fails. Now, on the original motion, that is put and seconded, so Mayor Joyner is correct in asking to speak to it. Mayor Joyner.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So it was moved and seconded to be put on the floor, and then put on the floor to be referred. It was lost. So my issue with that is that this agenda item has been before us for a while.
A number of months.
A number of months. And I look in the crowd, and I don't even see the representative, the planning representative in the crowd. So to me, that says it was a fait accompli that we were going to refer this. I refer things based on timing. I asked the question, when is it going to come back? They said June, staff said June, and it'll come back with next steps. I'm not interested in next steps. I think that the planner for the proponent should have been upfront with them and told them what they needed and what they had to do in order to satisfy the application. They did not do that. Therefore, I voted against the referral. I will be now voting for the denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Others wishing to speak? If not, I will call the question. Councillor Rayner.
Just one point is the fact that the people involved in this aren't even here tonight, and that would say a lot about the sincerity of this situation, and that really explains it all to me, black and white. Thank you.
Thank you. On the question, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. On item P73-18, that is a recommendation report regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for Robert Smith, 1333673 Ontario Limited, file number 1601-003-18. The recommendations are that report PD 068-18 regarding Robert Smith, 1333673 Ontario Limited, application for rezoning file number 1601003-18, dated May 14th, be received, and that Section 34 sub 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that an application for a zoning bylaw amendment 1601-003-18 submitted by Robert Smith be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Gannan, Mayor Joyner. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion carries. Item P74-18 is a recommendation report regarding the Niagara Region Road 12 landfill amending site plan agreement. And the recommendations are that PD 082-18 regarding Niagara Region Road 12 landfill amending site plan agreement dated May 14th, 2018 be received, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an amending site plan agreement once an appropriate site plan has been prepared by the region and approved by township staff and agencies. I need a mover, Councillor Bell, and Councillor Gannan. Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Okay, as to other business, there is a tabled item regarding the Public Advisory Committee for Industrial Wind Turbine minutes of October 24th, recommending to strike a committee of citizens regarding citizens impacted by tree loss due to turbine transmission lines. That item remains tabled. Item P75-18, this is for members of committee, other business matters of an informative nature. Councillor Trombetta, I'll start with you. Is there anything? Nothing? I'm seeing no one else around the table. Councillor Billsman.
Just to highlight the Silverdale Hall. Unfortunately, we missed 2 weeks in there, so we couldn't say it ahead of time to kind of promote it, but it was a beautiful success. Nice, cool, refreshing evening, and it brought out all the neighbors, and so I just wanted to.
And when it was time to execute leave, the rain came and everybody went home.
I know.
It was a wonderful night. You're absolutely right. Councillor Bell?
I just want to say that West Lincoln now has a new service club, Kiwanis of West Lincoln. They got chartered Saturday night. They now have 33 members and growing. And some of the members sit around this horseshoe, which is nice. They support the community fully. And I'd like to see more people come out and join us. It's every Tuesday, 7 o'clock upstairs at the Legion. So come on out and be part of the club.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. And congratulations to you and your committee for doing such a fine job of putting together the Charter Night celebrations. I know all of the committee and yourself and your wife worked very hard to make that a successful night. And I did pass the sobriety test on the way to here, even though I did win, I think, about 34 bottles of wine that night. So, thank you. Okay, seeing no other items, comments of an informative nature, is there any new business for which there will be required a motion? Seeing none, I'll move on to the fact that we will go into camera for confidential matters. And there are a few. There is an item P76-18, which is a matter that is subject to solicitor-client privilege for the replacement of the Ontario Municipal Board, the OMB, with Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. And the applicable closed session exemptions are for the purpose of educating or training the members where no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter in any way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council, local board, or committee. The item P77-18 is a town solicitor reporting on a legal matter, an OMB appeal to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, Phelps Homes. And the applicable closed session exemptions are personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Item P78-18 is another matter to be discussed with the town solicitor regarding the legal matter of an urban boundary expansion, and the applicable closed session exemptions are personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipal or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And there will be a recommendation coming out of camera on that item. On item P78-18 is another matter. It's a legal bylaw enforcement matter, zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw enforcement issue. The applicable closed session exemptions are personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And we have item P80-18, where our CAO will be discussing legal property matters for the proposal to purchase township lands. And the applicable closed session exemptions are a proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by the municipality or a local board. And that, too, will have a recommendation coming out of camera for that item. So I ask for a mover and seconder. No, I just have to declare the meeting adjourned. No, I have to ask for a mover and seconder to go into confidential. Moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Bilsma. All in favor? That motion carries. We are moving into camera. Thank you to everyone, and have a pleasant evening.